Okay, we're going to call to order our first hearing of the evening. But before I get to that, I have to mention that tonight a historic event is happening for the first time in the town of Milton. This is the first time that we have had 3 women out of the 9 to 10 members of the Board of Appeals, and this is the first Board of Appeals meeting with all women on the board. So this is very exciting for us gals here. Yeah. So now I'll call to order the meeting. On the application of Arrow Homes Investments. The applicant dated February 5th, 2018. Let's see. The applicant proposes to remove the existing low-pitch hip-style roof and replace it with a high-pitch gable-style roof, shed dormers at the existing 2-family home located at 440 Central Avenue. The existing building is 7.9 feet from the right side lot line, and Milton Section 6C1 requires that new buildings or new portions of buildings be set back at a minimum distance of 10 feet from the side lot line where the property is located. All set forth in this application and on supporting documents that have been on file with the Board of Appeals. So, without further ado, Arrow Homes, come on up and make sure that you talk into the microphones, even though they don't make your voice louder. They allow the people at home to hear us.
Yep.
Oh, I should mention that we have what we have in our file thus far is the application of the Board of Appeals on Arrow Homes investing for 440 Central Avenue, along with a letter from our building commissioner, Joseph Prondak, saying why the building permit was refused and the need to get a variance in order to proceed. We have some plans. We have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plans, pages of plans, along with a plot plan showing the site that we're talking about. And without further ado. Please state your name and address nice and clearly so we can hear it for the record, okay?
Greg Therian, I'm at 741 Brook Road, and the owner of Arrow Home Investments.
Okay.
How do you spell your last name?
Therrien.
Okay. And tell us about your application. What is it you're proposing to do? And just give a little background of it. Walk us through the paperwork.
So as stated in the quick brief that you have there, is where we remove the existing, and Aiden is also owner of Arrow Home Construction, sorry.
You're Aiden?
I'm Aiden Foley.
Aiden Foley.
Yeah, 16 Woodside Drive in Milton.
Okay. And you are partners?
Yes. Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so both owners. Okay, so we have our building at 440 Central Avenue. And if you could just walk us through what it is that you want to
And
do.
he can fill in as needed as the
Okay.
contractor too, but remove the existing roof and put put shed dormers on either side, similar to what we did, and I have pictures for all of you if you want to see it, because visual is helpful, but we did the house right next door 3 years ago. It's the blue house at 442 Central Ave. So that's really the gist of this permit. The existing, we're touching the face as we're going to be putting the third floor, the gable on again. So we're touching the existing, pre-existing non-conforming. We're not going even where it is currently. We're actually going in, probably 5 6 feet on either side,
Yeah.
on the third floor.
Basically, what's happening is the proposed dormer is all within regulations, meaning square footages, height regulations, setback regulations, everything. The only dilemma we have, which is why we're here today, on the right side of the building, the existing house is 7'9" from the lot line, the lot line.
Yep.
As you can see, the new proposed dormer is 12 feet in. But because we're changing the pitch of the roof, our new rafter cuts are going to sit on the existing wall.
Right.
And that's encroaching within the setback. So,
And I think the front is 13.2, and it's supposed to be 14 now. But from
the front we're caught for 13 inches.
Okay, very good.
And like I said, I have pictures. of
Yeah,
this.
if you could let us see those.
Before and
Yeah.
after what we did, because it's going to be pretty much identical to what we did on the last building.
It helps. I kind of lined them up so you can,
You can stay resting.
you can see.
And this is the house next door?
Yep.
442, okay.
So it's,
You can see the old ones, obviously, the trees, you couldn't even see this house, and the overall improvement of the property, you know.
Yikes.
So that's the existing, and then there you go. The dormers
the
are,
house next door now.
there's
Yeah.
the ones at the top. I'm not sure if you
Wow.
got a chance to see the property, so I just figured I'd bring,
Yeah, no, I actually checked it out.
oh, good.
'Cause
Yeah, of course, it's better, too.
It's
For a
also
real
the
estate lawyer, I
neighborhood,
was like, yeah,
yeah.
I always have to.
I met you, I think, when I bought my
Yes,
roadhouse.
that's right.
So there's the side views. You couldn't even see this property. Similar to the one we're doing, the backyard was, I would classify it literally as a jungle. It was on both of them.
very.
You can see the
right there,
pictures.
It was completely overgrown.
That's amazing. But you're not expanding the footprint at
Absolutely
all?
not. No,
It's
we're-
just going
It's just
up.
because that right
Yeah.
side, because we're dropping new rafters on, we're caught for those few inches.
We're actually going in from the sidewalls.
Well, it looks like you do nice work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I didn't know how this worked personally, so I could have had the two of the neighbors sent me emails, the two direct, the one in the blue house and one of the ones next to me that they're
Already.
totally supporting
The
this.
new owners of the,
I can-
That's always
house.
good to let us know that.
Want to have those emails.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where it was and how I should approach it to have him. One's like, I'm super busy, but if you need me to come, I will.
Yeah.
I said, I think an email is going to be great,
It
And that's-
registers where we're going with it, so.
either
yeah.
side of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, great. Is there anything else you'd like to present, or shall I see if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of the application or has questions about the application?
We're good, I think.
yeah, we don't, because
Okay, and is there anybody in the audience that is here to ask questions or have concerns or is against the application? We have thundering silence, which is a good thing. So I'm going to close the evidentiary portion of the meeting, and we can go to deliberation, and I'll ask Ms. O'Donnell to start.
As the applicant has stated, they're not actually increasing the footprint, on the ground. So it's really just sort of a technical issue, so I don't really have any issue with this
Okay.
application.
Do you have any questions, or?
I do not, I concur.
Okay. Well, I concur too. So the first
we go down in history.
hearing
Of all women,
of women has been able to get it done in less than 15 minutes, which is our allotted time. And I agree with my compatriots here that it looks like it's going to be a really beautiful thing for the neighborhood. It's very tasteful, it doesn't encroach anymore, and so all in favor of granting this variance, say aye. Aye. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations.
Likewise.
They say, when you want something done, give it to a busy woman.
It's going to take a couple of weeks or so to get the decision written, and then we have to circulate it for signatures, and then it will be filed with Susan Galvin. at which point there's a 20-day waiting period until you can pull the permit. But you'll
And
be,
you have to record the variance.
Okay.
Yeah, this goes to the registry of deeds, correct? Yep.
Once
and
the appeal period's expired.
yes, once the appeal period expires, it protects your
Yeah.
deed, your,
That's just something, just my own edification. I do that with my real estate attorney. He'll help me
Yeah.
just make sure it gets filed and all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Would you like this one?
Sure.
It's an easy one. I might want it. Yeah, if we could, yeah.
Thanks, they're very helpful. Right.
Oh, we have to wait 15 minutes?
Otherwise.
Good seeing you guys. Take care.
I thought we did this already. I thought we did this one already.
No, this is the, it's like the one we just did on Blue Hill.
No, I thought we did say, well, nonetheless, or maybe it was just me looking at it, I don't know.
We're doing the size one? We're doing the size one?
Doing Sias, yep. Come on in. We might want, it's good for us, and if people want to see it, they can stand up and look at it, okay? Yeah, great. So I'm going to call, no, I have to wait for 2 minutes.
Yeah, there should be one for each board member. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4.
These are 3 sets, okay, great. Oh, wait a minute, do you have one?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Goodness.
Sorry to keep you waiting. There we go. I'd like to call to order the second hearing of this evening upon the application of the Sias Group LLC and Edmund Murphy, dated February 5th, 2018, on file with the Board of Appeals for a special permit from the terms of Section 6A3 of Chapter 10 of the zoning bylaws of the town of Milton so as to subdivide the property at 11 Sias Lane, Milton. Currently, Lot A into 2 lots, Lot 1 and 2, so as to create a new separate lot for the construction of a single-family home on Center Lane in Milton. The single-family home is on Lot 1 and would contain 6,937 square feet with 71 feet of frontage along Sias Lane, and Lot 2 would contain 6,937 and a half square feet of land with 71.06 feet of frontage along Center Lane. The property lies in a Residence C zoning district. The Milton zoning bylaw, Section 6A3, requires that for a lot for construction of a new and separate single-family home contain at least 7,500 square feet of land and have 75 feet of frontage along the way. This proposal would violate Section 6A3, as lots 1 and 2 would not contain required square footage, nor would it have the required amount of frontage. In addition to that, we have the application. We have a letter from Mr. Prondak, the building inspector, building commissioner, explaining why he can't grant a building permit for that without some intercession by the Board of Appeals. And we have an explanation from Marion McKettrick, their attorney, that goes on for several pages, explaining the history and what the applicant proposes to do. We have an online map source site of what the locus is with the boundaries and where the proposed buildings would be. We also have some, it looks like these are schematics or kind of mock-ups of what the proposed building would be on Sias Lane. And we have a letter to Edmund Murphy from Marion McKettrick asking for an opinion of what the history of the land and if it's something that could be, in fact, reasonably asked for a subdivision of the property. There's a great deal of backup for that. There's a lot of attachments with plans of the, again, plans of what is proposed, quitclaim deeds from people that have owned in the past. There's also a decision of the Board of Appeals, I believe, for another property which was subdivided about 50 years ago, that is also on Sias Lane and has a house now built on it backing into Center Lane, which I'd just like to say is kind of special because my parents' house was next to that house that was being built on Center Lane. I lived there at the time, so this is kind of exciting, even though it's a couple of houses down. We have a plot plan as well, dated January 7th, 2018, prepared by SITEC Civil and Engineering. And I think we've come to the end of the packet that's been submitted. So I would like to turn to Mrs. McKettrick, and she can present how she would like to.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here again tonight with the Board of Appeals. And with me tonight is Ned Murphy, who owns the property, and Steve Giosa, and Mark Quattromoni, is that correct? Who are both engineers from SciTech Engineering, and I'll explain in my remarks what they're here to do tonight. I have given you a lot of material. I'm going to summarize it. I know that people who were here for the hearing may not have read any of it, or maybe they have, but in any case, I think it's important to explain the purpose and the basis for this application. So we have an applicant here who owns property at 11 Sias Lane. He only purchased it in November. And he is requesting that the Board of Appeals approve a special permit to allow the lot at 11 Sias Lane to be subdivided into 2 lots. And that application is under the terms of Section 6A3 of the Milton zoning bylaws, which has language which creates several exceptions to the Residence C, and this is in a Residence C district, requirements for area and frontage for a lot. The letter that I provided, the opinion letter, which in some detail provided the basis for applying for such a special permit has been reviewed by the building commissioner before he issued his denial letter, and he has said that he agrees with my opinion. That doesn't mean necessarily that the Board of Appeals will, but that we have spent a lot of time studying the lot, and I have met with the building commissioner, and he has reviewed all my information. And at this point, he feels that the lot would be eligible or the owner would be eligible to apply for a special permit. There are certain criteria for a special permit. There are the criteria that are in Section 6A3. There's also a requirement for a special permit that that issuing it will not be substantially detrimental to the neighborhood. So there's a burden that the applicant has to overcome, and I'd like to just make a few remarks about how he has developed information to try to do that. This lot, owned by the applicant, was first recorded as one 14,940 square foot lot in 1925. There was already one house on the lot, close to Sias Lane, which was constructed in 1920, according to assessor's records. In 1929, the owners, Howard Smith and his wife, who also owned land on the other side of Sias Lane, facing this lot, prepared and recorded a subdivision plan and created a second lot, which was a narrow strip of land along one edge of this lot. And they then sold the larger of the two lots to new owners, Mary and Margaret Black, but they retained ownership of the narrow strip for drainage purposes, apparently, according to the wording of the deed, while conveying an easement to the new owners to go on the land and to maintain it so long as they didn't interfere with drainage. The larger lot was 12,823 square feet, and the smaller lot was 2,117 square feet. In 1939, the Smiths sold their other property on the other side of Sias Lane, and at that time, they conveyed this narrow strip of land outright to Mary and Margaret Black. So after 1939, both lots were owned together again, subject still to this continuing drainage easement benefiting the lot on the other side of Sias Lane. Meanwhile, in February 1938, the town of Milton approved its zoning bylaws. And at that time, the single lot of 12,823 square feet met the terms of an exception in those bylaws, which provide that a lot in a Residence C district, which is recorded before the bylaws were adopted, and has more than 12,000 square feet and less than 15,000 square feet, can still be subdivided into two lots by right, providing that each new lot has more than 6,000 square feet and more than 60 feet of frontage. The larger lot continued to qualify as this pre-existing non-conforming divisible lot until 1970, when the town of Milton took a small area of land from the lot to lay out Center Lane as a public way. That reduced the larger lots to 11,907 square feet. Second small lot became 1,967 square feet. After the taking, while the single large lot no longer qualified by right to be divided into two lots, the two lots, as their combined commonly owned area is 13,874 square feet, continued to be eligible to be divided into two lots by a special permit from the Board of Appeals. And the remaining lot history is simply that Milton Academy purchased the lots from the Black estate, and then Mr. and Mrs. Delitas purchased the two lots from Milton Academy in 1993. The applicant purchased the two lots from Mr. and Mrs. Delitas in November last year. So the two lots were owned together from 1939 until today. The applicant's surveyor has prepared a plan, which you have, subdividing the land into two lots, each of which have in excess of 60 feet of frontage and in excess of 6,000 square feet of area, in order to meet the requirements of the exception in the zoning bylaw. And we've also provided a plot plan showing a footprint for a proposed new house, which meets setback requirements in the zoning bylaws. The second standard that has to be met for a special permit is that there be no substantial detriment to the neighborhood if the permit is issued. We've given you large copies of a conceptual design for a house. This is the house that the applicant proposes to build on this lot. show the views of the house. I provided large color pictures for the hearing, which are much better than the ones that you had in your materials, showing the front, side, and rear appearance of the house. And we've also provided some design plans with more detail about what would be inside the house. The house is 2 stories with 2 peaks in the roof and has a natural shingle exterior. The elevation and mass of the house is proposed to be similar to other homes in the neighborhood. The design fits in with the neighborhood, and the size of the house is comparable to other houses in the area. The special permit could require that the house built in the lot be substantially similar to these architectural plans. We believe that this house proposal, the design, will enhance and not detract from the surrounding neighborhood. There are a number of other issues, and the applicant has talked to neighbors, heard from neighbors. He knows they're concerned about drainage, and some neighbors have mentioned issues of vegetation and particular trees and screening. So at this point, what we can say about that is that the applicant certainly recognizes that when you develop a lot, any new lot, it does change the view for the neighbors. And to the extent reasonably possible, he is willing to remove or relocate trees or replace vegetation along an edge of the lot to provide screening or to correct existing issues. And certainly in the spirit of being a good neighbor, he will continue to discuss these issues with his neighbors and work out a satisfactory resolution. The other issue, which is a significant one with neighbors, and everybody recognizes that in this area it's a significant issue, is that of stormwater drainage. Therefore, the applicant, Ned Murphy, lives on Coolidge Road. He's lived in this neighborhood for a long time, so he is certainly well aware of water issues in the area. And for that reason, he has hired SciTech Engineering in advance of this hearing. And somebody from SciTech who specializes in stormwater management, that's Steve Giosa, and Mike Quattromoni, who specializes in planning and environmental engineering. They've studied the existing grade of the lot and in the area, the topography, the soil conditions, and the water table. And Mr. Giosa has prepared a detailed drainage plan for the new lot to control stormwater flow and to ensure that there will be no increase in flow onto neighboring lots. Both engineers are here tonight to answer questions, and if you're willing, I would like Mr. Giosa to explain the drainage engineering plan as part of our presentation, because this has been a major issue, and I feel it needs a lot of detailed response. Just to sum up then, providing the applicant develops the new lot with the drainage systems on the proposed plans, builds a house as shown on the conceptual plans provided, and specifically addresses any tree issues and provides screening to the extent possible, we believe there will be no substantial detriment to the neighborhood if a special permit under Section 6A3 is approved by this board. The Board of Appeals can require that an as-built plan for the drainage be approved by the town engineer as a condition of the special permit, and can require that the new house be substantially similar to the plans on file. So that summarizes the material that I've given you already. I don't think there's a lot in here that's new, except that the question of drainage is something that has come up since.
Okay.
And at this time, I'd like to invite the engineers to explain the plan if the board is agreeable.
That would be great.
Good evening. For the record,
You'll need them.
For the record, Steve Giosa with SciTech Engineering, and as Marion indicated, we've been retained to evaluate the development of the lot in terms of drainage controls and placement of the house on the property. We have an exhibit we have put together for the board to consider, in which this is Sias Lane at the top of the exhibit, Center Lane at the bottom. And the subject lot, as you can see,
You don't have 2 copies, do you, of that?
no,
Okay, can you turn it a
You
little
can
bit?
turn it a little bit, we can still see it.
okay. Tell me if that's,
Keep going. You can keep going.
yeah, a little bit more. I want to make sure everybody,
Yeah.
I know it's an awkward room for this type of exhibit.
You know,
Better if I just move back a
I'm
little bit? I can
thinking
turn
maybe
it
we
more.
can
Sure.
have that over here, and you can kind of cozy up.
Okay. Again, it's still difficult to get a good angle for everybody, but I'll bring the plan up a little closer to the neighbors after I do the initial walkthrough for the board members.
Okay.
So again, for orientation, we have Sias Lane, Center Lane, and the subject property running this narrow strip in between. The existing dwelling on Sias Lane, house number 11, is here on the upper portion of the exhibit. And the highlighted area, the piece that we have added some color to for clarity, is the area where Ned would like to construct a new home on the property. And the house is outlined in the light brown shading here that you see. I'm colorblind, so if that's not brown, forgive me. And what we've done to evaluate this property is a couple of things. We started out with a property boundary survey. We then developed topography, sent the survey crew to the site, took elevation readings. The topography of the property is such that generally drainage flows from the Sias Lane area through this property and then down towards Center Lane. Center Lane is built up above the subject lot, so there's a little depression that exists here in the front of the lot. It actually drops off from Center Lane, the back of the sidewalk into the lot on the north side is about a foot to foot and a half drop from the sidewalk into the lot. In the midpoint, it's about a 2.5 foot drop, and then it kind of matches up when we get to the south boundary line. But again, there's a little collection spot of runoff that originates on the upper lot. It also picks up drainage primarily from the house lots on either side. The house generally to the south on Center is built up a little bit and drains down in this direction towards the applicant's lot. There is an area in the front of the lot that borders us on the north that kind of ties into the low spot here, but it does drain generally down into this area. So this is kind of a collection point. So we know that that's going to be a critical element for controlling drainage on the property. But we did topography to determine those topographic features. Then what we did was we went out there with an excavator and we wanted to get an idea of soil conditions and groundwater conditions for the area. So we sent a licensed soil evaluator. The evaluator is someone who has been licensed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as an expert on soil identification and for making a determination for seasonal high groundwater. So when we do water table analysis, we don't look at what we see for water in the ground. We look for indicators of when during the peak period, seasonal periods, the water table has historically risen. Much like we do when we do septic system designs today. So when you're seeing septic systems designed, you actually see more of the septic systems being built much higher than where you see water. That's why you're seeing a lot more mounded systems, because the methodology for soil characterization is much more conservative than it was even as recently as 20 years ago when some of the homes may have been built here, or even if you're going back 30 or 40 years when Title V first went into effect. Again, the methods of determining groundwater were much different, not as conservative, so you ended up with a lot of homes built too low, the water in the basement issues, septic systems that failed because of water table issues. So we did our test bits on March 6th of this year. Took a look at the groundwater, took a look at the soil conditions. There's actually some pretty good sandy materials here. We've added soil logs to our exhibit. And our soil evaluator made a determination that generally speaking, the water table is only down about 4 feet in this area. So you got a relatively high water table throughout the site. Again, we did a test pit in the back, the higher portion of the lot. We did one at the very lowest portion of the lot, and we did one a little bit up gradient where the house is proposed for construction. We use that information to help design our drainage system. So we look at placement of a house, we want to make sure of a couple of things. That number one, we're not directing water onto an abutting property, but we also have to be aware of the fact that water from the surrounding area does drain onto our property. And we can't stop that from happening because that's the natural flow, so we can't create a dam and stop the flow of water. We have to find a way to control it on the property. So we have a couple of elements built into the design to control the water. First element is surface water. We know that water is draining in this direction, so we want to protect the applicant's home. So what we've done is created two swales, very shallow in nature, to deflect and run the water on the applicant's property along both edges of the proposed house. There's plenty of room. We left plenty of room to allow that movement of water in a controlled fashion. So we have a very shallow swale being created. It's only about 6 or 8 inches deep, and that's designed to direct water to 2 control points on the property. On the south side, that water will come down and it's directed into our driveway, then directed to the catch basin in the street here. So this will blend in with the grades here. This lot is about a foot higher at this point, the adjacent lot, about a foot higher than our proposed grades here. So we're still allowing the water to drain from our southerly abutter onto the property, then through the driveway and into the catch basin in the street, which is right in front of the lot. Then on the south side, we've got a little trickier condition because we don't want to block the water from our north abutter coming onto our land. And if we built our lot up, it would create a dam at this point and push the water back onto their property, which doesn't happen today, so we don't want that to occur. So we kept a low point on the applicant's property right here, and we're proposing to put a lawn drain in. The lawn drain we have designed, and we have specifications on the plan, will have what they call an atrium grate. That's a grate that has a little bit of a bubble to it. We typically use that in lawn areas so that if leaves fall out of the trees, it doesn't just sit on and bury the catch basin in the ground. You have a little bit of a mound, so it's designed to provide higher capacity of water flow, even when you get a little bit of leaf litter falling on the structure. And the shape is designed to shed the leaf litter to the sides to keep the grate slots open. So we've placed a small lawn drain here, very commonly used in small landscaped areas and picking up water. We've sized the lawn drain to handle at least a 10-year storm with only 1 inch of water puddling near the grate. And what that means from a storm standpoint is that's about 4.8 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour period. So it's a lot of water that we've taken into account. We've looked at the contributing drainage that comes through the lot, not only from the applicant's property, but from the surrounding areas that's going to get to this low point. We've sized the structure. These lawn drains come in different sizes. You can get them as small as, I think, 6 inches square. We actually have a 2-foot square cover or grate on our catch basin or our lawn drain. So there are 2 things that control the flow of water from the surface into a pipe in the ground. The first is the grate itself. So we've looked at the sizing of the type of grate to make sure we can get the water into the ground. And then the second thing is the pipe that will direct the water away from the property. And the amount of water we can push through a pipe is a function of the diameter of the pipe and the slope of the pipe. Those 2 factors affect how much water can move through. In this case, because of the slope that we're able to create and the fact that we can get that full 10-year event into the property, we are going with a 6-inch cast iron line. And the reason we're going with cast iron, just as all the pipes in the street are cast iron, you have a very shallow drainage system in center lane, so we have to keep the pipe high, and to protect it for truck and vehicular cover and structural stability, the cast iron pipe is the preferred option from an engineering standpoint. So our design assumes we have no other controls on the property, that everything is just directed to that lawn drain and then drains into our collection system and stays from impacting the adjacent properties or from affecting the public way. But we don't want to just rely on that, so our design also includes a roof recharge system. So what we're doing, and we have a detail of that on the plan as well, is we're going to take all the roof drains from the property, from the proposed house. We're going to bring a pipe on both sides into this roof drain system. And what we do with the roof drains is we design them to handle the first 1 inch of water off the roof. We take 100% of that water and we provide enough storage. We almost look at it as it's a bathtub. We take all that water, put it in a bathtub, and it holds that water. But the reality is, we surround that bathtub, instead of with an impervious barrier, we put crushed stone. It'll be washed crushed stone. There's filter fabric to keep soils from flushing into it. And we put percolation sand, almost like you were building a septic system. We take out the natural soils that are not conducive to absorbing water, and we replace it with sand that you would use to build a septic system. So we have septic system sand below and around the system. We have washed crushed stone above it, and we have these pipes coming in. So effectively, we have a system that takes the water and allows recharge into the ground, much like this little depression does now. This depression allows for the recharge of water. So we're matching existing conditions with how this particular area functions, and we think we're improving it where we have, when this exceeds its capacity. So when that 1 inch rainfall gets exceeded, there are little overflows at the downspouts, which discharge into the swale, which directs the water down to the lawn drain or into the existing drainage catch basin in the street. So you have a kind of a fail-safe system. We want to get water into the ground initially to mirror existing recharge on the lot. But then you also want to assume that you're going to get a bigger storm and it's going to exceed the capacity. Where does the water go? We want it to go in a controlled fashion and not worry about pumping and those mechanical means. And now we're directing that water so that it goes to our control points here and here. Finally, we have the potential for a sump pump in the basement. I think everybody in the neighborhood probably has a sump pump. We're going to keep our house higher than the water table, but you always want to have, again, a backup. We've placed a notation on the plan that if the applicant does in fact install a sump pump, he is not to discharge that to the surface. It would have to be direct connected into the lawn drain, which has the extra capacity to handle the seasonal use of a sump pump in this area. So there is a prohibition on discharging the sump pump to the surface in our notation on the plan. Finally, well, two final elements. Contractors get plans, they don't always build what we design, and they don't always build it exactly as we design it. So we've also put a condition that we would anticipate being a condition of this project, that upon completion of the construction, an as-built drawing be prepared by an engineer, will go out, certify that the contractor has complied with the design elements from a grading standpoint, from a drainage control standpoint, and prepare a plan. And then we have a notation that if in fact the contractor's work is found not to be in compliance, that the contractor will immediately need to remedy that situation, and we would have to certify before they get their final payment that they have in fact complied with the design plan. Maintenance is an issue. We always want to be cognizant of the fact that every type of system requires some form of maintenance. You'll see on the detail for the recharge units, we have an inspection port coming to the surface. So periodic inspections would occur in which we check the level in the, by pulling the cap off and making sure this system is draining correctly. If it's not draining correctly, it's a sign that there's some sediment that got into the system. That can easily be excavate the top, pull the unit out, fix the sand or the soil underneath, and replace it. These are only picking up roof drains, so you really shouldn't see that clogging of the system, because we're wrapping the system with a filter fabric so that fine particles from the surrounding soil can't flush into the system. We're also specifying, and we've put this on the plan, that all of the gutters would have to have leaf guards. So with roof recharge systems, what you're worried about is leaf debris getting into the gutters, flushing down the downspouts, in getting into these chambers. By having leaf guards and the need for periodic cleaning of those, and we've actually put the cleaning schedule on the plan, so the homeowner knows this is what they have to do to maintain the system, clean the gutters, inspect the lawn drain. This little cap on the lawn drain pulls up. They can take any debris that may have gotten into there out, put the cap back, clean off the top, and again, it's in a landscaped area. We anticipate there'll be some shrubbery planted down in this area. It really gets disguised within the landscaping a little bit. It's green in color. I think that's somebody's idea of making it blend in with the lawn, but at the end of the day, it's a very low-maintenance system, and we have inspection areas here. We have inspection ports on both chambers in the system. They're both called for on the plan. And we actually have a clean-out on the overflow going to the street drain system. So you have a point of cleaning the pipeline here and a point of cleaning the pipeline here in the event that there's any clogging of the system. So we've got a lot of options, and they're all spelled out on the plan to maintain the drainage patterns that exist in the area. We think we're actually going to divert water that normally right now sits in a low spot here, and I would guess creates a mosquito hazard at certain times of the year. That's going to be eliminated, and the water will be controlled solely on the applicant's property. It's probably a long-winded explanation, but that's what we're proposing at this time.
Thank you.
If I may, if you want me to bring the plan a little closer.
Yes, that would be
and-
great. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes, absolutely.
So if the flow of the water is from Sias down to Center Lane, how are you doing anything on the existing 11 Sias to sort of, you have a house and a lot of impervious surface on that lot. Is there any of your work being done to sort of improve?
That's an excellent point. We've made a recommendation to the owner, and he's agreed. What we think we're going to do, and I think it's going to be an effective way of at least slowing some of that water from continuing down the hill, is we would put a continuous, along the boundary line between the two lots, and I forgot to mention this earlier, a crushed stone trench. That crushed stone trench would be washed crushed stone, filter fabric wrap, some pea stone on the surface. So what we do is we put about this much pea stone on top. Underneath that goes a filter fabric, and then the washed stone. The filter fabric keeps the fine particles from washing into the real stone. That's going to give us a little bit of a barrier buffer, but we didn't want to take that into account in our analysis. So we're assuming that's not in place or it's not working. But I think that that would be an effective way of providing a short circuiting of some of the water coming down the hill. And we did talk about that with the owner, and I believe he's agreed that that's an acceptable option.
I mean, because it seems to me that you would want to, if you have all this water coming from all these other lots, you ought, and you own the lot north of it, that it would
It's an excellent idea, and again, that
make some
was,
sense to do some roof drains on that, and maybe a better surface for the driveway, so that you're not having so much water coming off of that and dumping into the house.
The house currently, actually, yeah, the
Yeah.
house currently has roof drains. It goes into
Okay.
some sort of reservoir in the property.
so I can,
Okay. People want to take a look at that?
so again, for the people, and it's still even up close, it's a little difficult to
Oh, no,
see
I
the
don't.
details.
Do we have a copy of that that we can put with the record?
I'm going to leave this with you tonight.
Okay.
So this is for the board's records.
Great.
But there's, again, there's details, and I know it's difficult to see. The drainage system, the house placement. This is the actual lot that's being created. Driveway coming out to Center Lane there. The maintenance notes and protocol there, and the sizing calculations for the recharge system. And then the soil logs and water table data on the plan here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have any questions? No, any questions? Okay, I'm not sure what the next thing you'd like on your agenda for.
I have a question.
We will be getting to some, but is it specifically on this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Name and address and speak into the microphone.
My name is Leslie Chevry. I live in the house south of this directly south of this property.
And the address on that?
Is 22 Center Lane. And I think, maybe I was mistaken, I thought I heard you say that the land is sort of at even on my side, where I think my house was built 15 years ago, and did this exact thing. They split the lot, except the lot that the original house had, let's call it, was much wider. So I don't think they went through these hoops. But they had to crown the land to build the house, so you didn't see 5 feet of foundation before you got to our house. So our lot is crowned, and then you have these gullies, which are the next two lots subsequent, I guess, south of my house. And there's at least a 4-foot drop between my front yard and what everyone in the neighborhood calls the lake. And so, maybe I misunderstood. I thought you implied that it was sort of even level, and a 4-foot drop is not even in my world. But my real question was, well, you own the property, you can make sure the drains are always cleared and done that. But once, I assume you don't know anyone that's gonna be ultimately living there, so how do you force a neighbor to clean their gutters, clean their drown? So how are we not gonna end up subsequently in years to come if they don't clean these gutters and et cetera? It sounds great now while you're taking care of it, but if it's sold, I can't go to my next door neighbor and say, you just moved in, but you need to go clean your gutters right now. So how's that? Okay.
That's probably not in our,
But aren't they going to get, I mean, isn't this house going to get wet first?
yeah.
It's the low spot. So if they're not cleaning out their own gutters and their drains, they're the ones who,
They'll be hit
if your
first.
study of the topography is correct, they're the ones who are going to be, swimming to the house or getting a
Maybe,
kayak.
but if they don't have a finished basement, they don't have, a big, loss of monetary in the game, whereas I have a completely finished basement.
They do have a finished basement in the plans.
Well, maybe they have more money than I do. I just know that I've replaced my basement twice, and I'd rather not do it a third time just because of a neighbor.
Can we
Wait a
stick
minute.
to the question,
I
though?
think we have to, yeah, because we'll have an opportunity for people
Might be a
to.
quick question, I
Yeah,
apologize.
we'll have an opportunity for people to ask questions and, voice any problems that they might have with the application. So unless there's some way that you could address that and help Mrs. Chevrolet out, I'd like to defer that just a wee bit, but if you can, that would be great.
Yes, very simply. Yeah, you did misunderstand what I was saying about your property. You are higher, and it does drop down that 3.5 to 4 feet that you're referring to. The drop occurs, her home is over here. It is built up higher, as it probably should be. It maybe should have been built maybe a little bit higher, but it's here, and the topography shown on the plan, this is elevation 67, right at the boundary line. It's actually a little bit higher, a little off the property. We're on elevation 68 here. It drops down to about 64.8 at the low point. Actually 64.8, because we did the test pit in the low point. So that's about that 4-foot drop you're referring to going down at that hole. So that is what is depicted on the plan. I think you misunderstood. I think what I was saying is the sidewalk in front of your house is more flush with your lawn area, but the sidewalk in front of the applicant's property dips down into that low area on his property. That's what I was referring to.
Okay,
Thank you.
yes.
I just wanted to make one comment, which is that when a plan like this is submitted to a Board of Appeals, should it choose to issue a special permit and condition the permit on the plan becomes a vehicle for enforcement by the building commissioner. This is quite somewhat unusual. I mean, this is the kind of plan I've seen a lot with the Conservation Commission. This single lot isn't required to submit such a plan, but we are submitting it because drainage is a big issue in this area. And it provides a vehicle for enforcement so that, I think I would tend to agree that if there's a failure to clean drains or to clean gutters, that probably the owner of this lot is the one that's going to really suffer from it. However, should there be a condition that's somehow caused by that failure to maintain, and it's not, and it's affecting nearby lots, then the remedy would be to go to the building commissioner and have him issue some kind of enforcement order, and possibly even bring it back to the Board of Appeals. But and those enforcement orders are, I mean, you need to respond to them
Yes, you
quickly.
do. Yes, you do.
So that's just, I don't know if everybody's aware that that mechanism is there. I don't think normally you have this type of plan associated with a Board of Appeals decision. You do with Conservation Commission orders of condition, and they do provide a good, I mean, that is always the question that comes up, and there is an ability for the town to do enforcement because the decision itself was conditioned on this plan.
Yes, that's why I wanted to make sure that we had that in the record so that we could, if we choose to allow this, that could be part of the conditions that we would put.
Really, I think drainage is the big topic, and I'm sure that there are people here who want to talk about various things. I
Right.
don't have anything to add at this time. If
Okay.
you give me an opportunity at the end,
Sure.
I might have some summing up that I want to do, but
Okay.
I'd be happy to move out of the way if
Thank you,
want
Mrs.
to
McEttrick.
hear from the audience.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to know if there's anyone that would like to speak in favor of the application. And I'm not seeing any hands. Would there be anybody that would like to ask some questions of the applicant or express some unhappiness with the application? Yes, sir. Come on up so you
Madam
can,
Chair, yes, I have a big voice.
well, it's
Yes,
got to
Madam
go,
Chair,
It's not for here, it's for the
I
television.
understand.
if you could hand it to him,
Yeah, I'll
perhaps?
come up.
Oh, okay.
Madam Chair, my name is Dale Deletis. My wife Carol and I owned 11 Sias Lane for 23 years. We sold that property to Mr. Murphy in November. I'm here tonight with the abutters, Michael and Mrs. Chevery, and Caitlin, who are the neighbors and the abutters. May we take our place at the table to present our
Certainly,
our ideas.
certainly, come up.
Thank you. Michael?
And if you just state your name and address for the record.
Now? Speak into the microphone.
In the-
Sure, yep.
I'm Caitlin Spitz, and I live at 35 Center Lane.
I'm Michael Chevery. I live at 22 Center Lane, which on that map would be the abutter to the south, with my lovely wife Leslie.
And I'm still Leslie Chevery.
And I'm Dale Deletis. I now live at number 4 Powder Mill Road here in Milton.
Okay.
And we're here tonight, standing together, to urge you not to give the special permit to Mr. Murphy to divide the property and to build this house. And we have several reasons for that. The first reason is the reason why we're here tonight. If Mr. Murphy builds the house, divides the lot and builds the house, he violates the town bylaws. He violates the town bylaws for frontage, and he violates the town bylaws for total square footage. It's a prima facie argument. It's irrefutable. It's about measurements. It's about dimensions. You can count them. It's about facts. It's not, as we say these days, fake news.
Don't want anybody to hear fake news.
And he has already been turned down once on this basis, and so we urge you, on that basis alone, it is a necessary and sufficient argument.
What was the base,
He was-
turned down
He was
for?
turned down once by the town engineer. You said it earlier, ma'am.
Oh, that's, yes, by the
Joseph.
Joe Prondak,
Okay.
yes. Which is typically what is done in the process. If there's a reason that a building permit cannot be issued without some kind of variance or special permit, then that's why they come and visit us.
But sure, even without that, as I say, it's a necessary and sufficient argument. He violates the town bylaws. There's a second reason, and we've heard some talk already tonight about that second reason. It's called water. And I very much appreciate the detailed presentation and the specifics that you've presented about drainage. But in opposition to the days and the weeks that the previous speaker has used, has explained the study that he's done of the land, I'm here with 23 years of experiential evidence about that land. So I'm going to talk about it in my way. So 11 Science Lane has a building which is built into a ledge. And then the land slopes down from that ledge toward Center Lane. And the sloping starts almost immediately in the back of the yard. There's a soft area, and then the land moves down into what was referred to as a little collection point, a depression. What happens there is when it rains, the water comes down from the heavens, it saturates that topsoil, which is about 4 feet, and then it joins the groundwater that is underneath there, and a lake forms. That's what we called it. Even on a normal rainfall, my wife and I would stand at our back window and we would watch the lake collect. If there was a torrential rain, a big lake would form back there. And we could see the lake coming toward the house. Then there's a second issue here, which also has been alluded to, which is about the slope. But I want to add one detail to you. The driveway slopes back, and so that when there would be a large rain, the water would collect on the driveway, and then a river would form, and it would go down the back. It would saturate into the ground, and if there was enough rain, the river would meet the lake, and a big lake would start coming up toward the house. And we watched all of this for 23 years. Now, Mr. Murphy and his engineers have presented these detailed plans, and we don't have those kinds of detailed plans. Board of Appeals members, what we have is experience on that land. What they have is supposition, conclusions, good information, drawing a hypothesis. And opposed to that hypothesis, we have this experience. So many times, friends and family members would say to us, well, Carol and Dale, why don't you just divide the lot and put a house back there? You could make a killing. And my wife and I didn't even have to respond. We said over and over again to friends and family, we said for us to do so would be to provide a lemon of a house with a knowing problem. We knew that there would be a problem, and we would sell it. It would be fraud on our part, and we wouldn't do that. So what I'm suggesting is that this, even with all of this drainage that has been spoken of tonight, water will have its way. And Mr. Murphy is going to build a house on top of a lake. Now, to buttress that argument, I want to go back to my neighbors, Michael and Leslie, Because, as we have already stated, their land was divided at number 13 Sias Lane, and a house was built on the back of the lot. And I'm going to give one piece of information and then turn it over to them. My wife and I watched the lot being excavated, and the pumping went on for 3 days to get the water out of that lot. And then the building was turned over to them. So, Michael, go ahead.
So my name is Michael Chevrier. I live at 22 Center Lane. And we purchased the house in 2004 from Norfolk Development Custom Home Builders, Sullivan Brothers, who had done some work in the Columbines. When we got into the project, we didn't know about this water issue. We didn't have any experience. We lived in Rosendale at the time. It was our dream house. We sold property in Rosendale and Boston to purchase this house from the Sullivan Brothers.
For $847,000?
Correct.
Right.
$845,000. The first year we lived in the house, we were so happy to move to the town of Milton and the school systems and everything else. We went away to find out when we came home from the weekend that we had 6 inches of water in our basement, and we couldn't understand why. Here's a house for $845,000 that had 6 inches of water in its basement. That cost us to remove, fix, strategize, repair destruction. That first time around was $8,500 to fix that. We then determined that we needed to get some higher knowledge into that area because of the magic that was happening. We replaced the sub pump to a commercial level, or commercial type style that could meet the gallons that it would pump. We went with Josh Oldfield from Thayer Nursery to understand, with his expertise, on how we could prepare the lot for both drainage, catch basins, some of the things that he's talked about today, on how we could move it to the left and the right from the property, because our backyard on our property was pooling. With that, they did a series of different things. All of our downspouts and the collection on the roof is moved 8 feet off of the structure, both in the front, the side, and the back. They did all this cast iron type of an octopus, if you will, around the property. We have watched over 14 years what Dale has spoke about, the aggression and regression of his property, of the water, how it would creep up his property and then down. We witnessed this over the course of 6 to 12 times over the year. Sometimes it could be because it came from Sias Lane and just naturally flowed down in there, to major storms. It seemed like if we had a ½ an inch of water or more, it would pull, the pump would turn on. It didn't matter what we did, it didn't correct. I like to think that we had some of the best people working on our property to understand what we were going through. Whereupon, 3 years later from that, that would bring you around 2009, we had a major storm. Magic happened. We had a finished basement. We waited for the house to settle. And that removal and destruction of the playroom that we had put down there was $15,900. So all in, I'm at $23,000. We now had Josh come back, do some wider piping, some other things, and I have to tell you, I'm in for $39,900 to date, just because of the water. The fears that we have are, if it rains, are we good? If the power goes out, how do we handle it? To the point where I had to have an electrician come out and put on a generator to be a backup to this magic that's happening. I think it's a combination of the drain water runoff, but I also think there's something underneath the ground there. There's neighbors that live in that neighborhood that will tell you that the Milton Times in 1988 took pictures of people kayaking in front of 22 Center Lane in this proposed property. So it's, you know, you can say that, you know, you can put all of these things. I'm telling you, I have these things. I have them. There's magic there.
And
You can't fool Mother Nature. And this is there, and you can't ultimately absolutely fix it. You can redirect it, and you can steer it. The question is, I'm on the south property of that. I've already dealt with this. If you dig up that property and you put a foundation, you are now moving that water somewhere. I don't know where it is. Is it across the street? I've seen that pull over the proposed lot into Center Lane and flood it. There are people across the street, and there's people to the left and the right that will, this thing here will be a detriment to the folks on Center Lane and the 8 houses that are down that section. I've been able to adapt with this. I've been able to be flexible and understand what I have and just deal with it. However, when I can't sleep at night knowing that this thing's gonna go in there, and what is it gonna do to me? I have an investment of $39,900 to date. I have the experience of 14 years and the fears each and every storm that comes. With these nor'easters that come through and they melt, I can't control that. But I do know currently right now, since the first nor'easter, call it 14 days, my pump has been on 12 days straight. There are people that live across from me who pump constantly. We've adapted to it. It's a lovely area. I think it's probably one of the best neighborhoods that you could trick or treat in. To this, there are 42 names and people that we had signed up and oppose this that we can turn in.
Yes, we
that
would
are
like to
against
see
this.
that.
These are neighbors, and I have to tell you, living in the town, I do my job, I wave. Until this property came in, I didn't know what kind of neighbors I had. I didn't know that anybody understood what I had purchased. Apparently they did. And then every single one of them said, for the ones that have been around, we know how you feel, we know what you're going through. So with that, I would not want the next person to deal what I have to deal with.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
I'd
I
like-
want to add one piece of information, if I may.
Actually, could I read this into the record first?
Sure,
And then we'll
of
get
course.
right back to you. This is signed by, you said 42, I believe it. There's a lot of people on these sheets. It says, every spring, late March and April, and fall, September and October, the area in question proposed Lot 2 floods. This might be called a vernal pool as defined by Mass Audubon. Previous owners, Dale and Carol Deletis, would not split the land because of the water issue. I have reached out for their email address to see if they would get a statement from them, which apparently we have. Based on current zoning law, they do not have the frontage space for either Lot 1 or 2. However, Lot 1, which is the existing house on Sias Lane, is on a private way, so the frontage is more lax. The proposed street lot number 2 is on Center Lane, which is a public way and laws are binding. They would need a special appeal process easement or variance. The house on Sias Lane sold for $699K. By splitting the property, essentially the builder stands to double his return on investment. A comparable house in the neighborhood lasts 100 days, sold for over $900K. If a dwelling is constructed, whatever size, the water table will change and wreak havoc to our basement and neighbors on a regular basis. The water will need to go somewhere. It is hard to imagine how the property could pass the purge test. And it's signed by all of these people. This will be part of the record as well. Thank you for that.
And yes, there are 60 houses in the neighborhood, and that's 42 out of 60. Some people weren't home. That's 70% of the neighbors. And I want to add this one other piece. When Michael talks about the water issues, I was here in this very room 15 years ago with some neighbors when the Board of Appeals granted a special permit for a house to be built on the back lot of 13 Sias Lane. And this is what the results have been of that special permit. So,
Wish somebody gave me the minutes of that.
or if I'd been a good neighbor, I'd come over and said, don't buy this house.
No, I
So we
wouldn't
have,
change it for the world. I just wish buyer beware and I knew.
and so this is Caitlin Spitz, who lives to the north. And Caitlin wants to talk about the detriment to the neighborhood.
So I wrote things down because I knew if I didn't write it down, I would forget. Most of these things have already been talked about, but I'm going to talk about it from my point of view because I've only been here for 2 years and 3 months. My husband and I, Ben, raise your hands. You're there? Yeah. And we moved from West Roxbury because we wanted to live in Milton and great school system, etc. So we bought our house. Our house is on a very busy street, as all of you know, Center Street, and people fly down that street, unfortunately. So we don't play in the front yard because our 3 children are under 5, and I'm terrified that something's going to happen. So the only piece that we have is the backyard. We are out there every single day if we can help it. It's the only privacy we have because, as you know, again, people line up on that street in traffic, and so again, we're not playing out there. It's that backyard. I know that moving to Milton or somewhere close to Boston, everybody lives on top of everybody. I don't think Ben and I are any special. But what I do think is special is that we bought that house and we were told that that lot behind us was not going to be built on because it was unbuildable, because it didn't have enough room. And the reason that we bought on a busy street with 3 children, or else we wouldn't have done so. So can we just up and sell our house and go somewhere else? No. We're a young family of 5, and that's not going to happen. So we are where we are, and we love our house, and we want to stay. But that is a big piece of this. We have now loads of friends down the street. All of the kids' friends are on Center Lane. It is wonderful. What's not wonderful is that their sump pumps are going all day, every day, even when it doesn't rain. So we're all aware of the water problem. We've all talked about the water problem. We know it's a serious issue. We know that we call it the lake. The whole neighborhood calls it the lake. We have water in our basement. When we bought our house, they told us it was a damp basement. Fine. We have a sump pump. It's sort of a piece of crap. It's like not a great commercial sump pump. But thankfully, we've only had water in our basement 3 times. One of them was the first nor'easter we just had. It went on all day long. And the 3 times we've had it in the 2 years and 3 months, the 3 times it's gone on all day. So it's not a short time, but it's only 3 times. So it might be damp, but it's not wet. I think when we discussed, and we discussed this with Mr. Murphy, Mr. Murphy, we came over, he came over, we talked about it, and we shared how terrified we were of the water and that we know what's going on and that we know there's water back there because we call it the lake, and if you build this proposed house, our water problem may get worse. And he stated something that after doing lots of research, he's correct in saying that, well, it's hard to prove that by my building you got more water. And after reading lots and lots, that seems the case, which you can only imagine terrifies us even more because we would be screwed. to put it frank. We don't want any destruction in our property, obviously by a development. The runoff after the construction will likely end up in our backyard. I don't know, and this is a question for you, were you going to regrade this property higher? Because if you fill it in, right, because it's a big divot, and if you fill it in and it's now, I don't know, 6 feet higher than it was, guess who's the divot? I am. And guess where the water's gonna go? To me. And that means no playing in the backyard. That means we become the lake. That means my basement is now probably flooded. If water is displaced, it's gonna go somewhere. It's not gonna just disappear. So who's planning independently of the structure for each one of us abutters? Who's planning to be held responsible when each one of us gets a flood? What happens? What do we do? And I don't know the answer to that because I don't know how this works, but I don't think that we should be held responsible for that. I know that not everybody is privy to privacy in this town because again, we live on top of each other, but we're lucky enough to have privacy in our backyard, and that's what we bought. We were told that it wasn't going to be built, and we bought because there was privacy. There's 20 plus trees. They're from the 1920s. They're these beautiful old trees. I know nobody cares about trees, or not everybody cares about trees or wildlife, but we do. We've seen owls, we've seen red-tailed hawks, and no, they're not endangered. So no, I get it. It's probably like not endangered, check it off the list, but for us it matters. And taking down all of those trees would be upsetting to all of us. It's the only shade we have. It's the only privacy we have. Again, in reading all of this, we're taxpayers too. We pay our taxes on time, we're in the neighborhood, we're good neighbors. This should be more about, is it gonna be detrimental to the people, the neighborhood, us, the abutters? I think it's going to be. Lots of us think it's unreasonable. I mean, you have a room full of people here that are supporting us and people who have signed that. I think that when we look at this, if it's going to be detrimental to the neighbors, if it's going to be detrimental to our home, I draw the line there. Because I don't hear anything that's saying, outside of your structure, here's what we're going to do for each and every neighbor. Because we live in, for lack of a better word, a wetland. There's only 4 feet down there's water. I don't know how you mitigate that.
What was that?
I don't know how you fix that.
Okay. Is there anything else?
No.
That's a lot, though.
That's enough.
Madam Chair and Board, if I could conclude for us?
Sure.
So, Mr. Murphy presents his engineers with their substantial study. We are presenting you 53 years of experience of living in that area. 23 years, 15 years, 3 years. And we've watched the water all those years. And we don't want in that neighborhood for that to happen. And we think that may be the house you were talking about.
Mr. Driscoll built that.
That was the one next to, yeah.
Yes.
We had left by then, but yes.
That's what happened.
Yep.
So they
When
were
it was built.
They were into that.
Paul's house.
Paul is here. He can tell you
Okay.
some history on that. So I guess this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I live across the street.
Would you like to come up and,
Just finally, I would.
Oh,
like
I'm
to
sorry.
put into record, I did take some pictures of this land, and I think the biggest, this was at 1:30 PM. You can see it's about an inch deep wide puddle. Puddle. And at 5 o'clock, it looked like this. And at 8 o'clock the next morning, it looked like this. So you can see from 5 PM to 8 AM, it didn't really subside very much. Do I have these upside?
Yeah, now we can see it.
You know what I mean?
You got it. Better,
So, it went from an inch puddle to this very quickly, and went from this to this in a very long period of time, really.
Okay.
And this was just one storm. So I just would like to put these into the record.
Absolutely,
And they're
sure.
all time-stamped and
Okay.
dated.
Thank you.
Okay, now, I'll move.
I know it's late. I just have one quick comment.
Your name and address?
My name is Mary Kane. I live 17 Central Lane. And maybe I can also speak for my next door neighbor, Kathy Carlson, and my other neighbor in the back, Arlene and Melvin Klutz. And I don't know who else lives, but we're right across from this area that's going to be built on. And when my daughters were growing up, they were maybe 16 or 17, and they heard they were building this. They're not professional. I'm not a professional. I'm a teacher. I
I
understand.
think a teacher is a professional.
Well, I understand the water travels, but they said to me, Mom, you gotta be kidding, they're building a house there. The other day, last week, when they came and said they're building another house on that other lot, my older daughter, who lives in Milton, she's 40, she said, what? They're building a house on our skating rink? That's where we used to skate and play and use our kayak. So I am not a student. I know you have the expertise. I know water travels. And I do have concerns. I have a letter I'd like to just submit. I don't want to read it. I know it's late. It's about trees. I love trees. Not everybody does.
Okay, let me just mention that the gist of this letter is, I'm just going to summarize this, that you've lived here for many years, on Central Lane for 39 years. Basically, when...
There are some quotes from Chief Seattle.
There are. I kind of like to read them out loud, but I know we're running a little bit late.
It is late. You can read it out loud if you like. That's all I have.
But let me just say, yes, trees are important. Trees are also something that, absorb water, and I understand that. So thank you very much. That'll be part of the record as well. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? And come on up.
My name's Diane Feeney. I'm at 45 Center Street, so our part of the house sits on Center Street, and then the rest of it on Cyrus Lane. Dale and I, and Carol, and my husband Mike, and the kids. So we moved in together. So it took us probably about 10 years to divert water from Cyrus Lane coming down into our yard, Dale's yard. We would build it up, and over time, we figured it out. And then, as far as Ben and Kate, literally the people that had lived there prior, actually 2 families, we diverted. We built a wall up in our backyard, so a lot of the water wouldn't flow down. Now with this, so my question is that the house is going to be higher than the water table. I've seen the lake there over the years. The trees actually have really done beautifully because of the water. And they sway. All the other trees around the area have gone down because of storms. They're the bigger, they don't have the branches or whatever, but those trees, because of the water. So that's a piece of it, and they have absorbed water. Unbelievable. My piece now that this is really beautifully done, and you're putting separated crushed stone between the lots, we had to build up the left-hand side of our land in order and divert water from how the water goes down. So actually, it helped with the trees, and by building this edge up, there was no water going into, well, it's Caton Ben's, but before that, it was the Doyles. And then what we did is we have a shed there, but underneath that shed, I can't tell you how much crushed stone we put down in there. So that, and we didn't have engineers. We just were like, okay, we can figure this out. And that's the bottom line. So we've had to divert all these years. If you build up that crushed stone with, and I'm certainly no engineer, if the house is higher than the water table and the buildup, and you're putting separated crushed stone between the lots, and that's a lake, you're going to have to put, I believe, more than a 4-foot existing barrier, in order for diversion. That's going to end up changing our dynamics of our home. We stop water from getting into our lower, because of the slope or whatever, so that water will go directly into our basement. We've never had water. Maybe we've diverted, we've done lots of stuff, but I will tell you that of how that, just the water itself, that will end up going down into our slope and into a finished basement that I've been wanting for 20 years. And it is getting started. And I do know just from that slope, so that's, I actually have a couple of other questions, but I'm not going to take the stand, I think, as far as just your dynamics. But that was.
Thank you, Mrs. Feeney. Someone else? Any more questions or people would like to speak? Come up.
I'm Bridget Carpenter, 15 Sias Lane, so the house in back of the Chevrys. And I'm just going to say something that everybody knows anyways, is that water will find its way to get wherever it wants to go. And we've had a dry basement. We've been there the same amount of time as the Chevrys, 14 years in June. And we have a dry basement. And when we had that huge storm X amount of years ago, we had a finished basement, a small opening where your return for your sewer or something is, that wasn't cemented in. And we had already been there years and never had water. Water had found its way in that tiny opening and flooded our whole basement. We fixed it, and we don't pump, and we've never had water since. But the reality is water will find its way to go. This is a lake, and the question is, where is that water going to go? It's not just going to go into the sewer catch drain at the front of the property. So, again, the concern is, where is this lake water going to go?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Hello, my name is Tony Serdam. I live at 21 Sias Lane. I live next to the Carpenters and in back of the Chevrys. We've lived at 21 since 1990, and over that period of time, we have observed multiple floodings of the back of the Deletases. We can confirm that's an issue. we observed during the construction of the Chevry's home. At one point during the construction, when it was simply the foundation, there was 4 feet of water in the foundation before the structure was even finished. So I don't know if it's in the record anywhere, whether there were studies done for that construction, but obviously it's a major issue. What's been addressed here has been, in my opinion, solely a concern about what's coming up, the water that's coming off the upper lot number 1. I printed out from the town records today the contours of the land on Center Lane and Sias and extending down to Stoddard and beyond to Coolidge. And I'll leave you with a copy of this. The contour in our yard is 70 feet at the midpoint in the depth of the property. And from there, it drops down to that low point in the new construction area, proposed construction area. And the height or the altitude of the contours towards Randolph Avenue increase. So it's not simply what's coming off of the property on Sias Lane. That is water that's coming from an enormous area, at least 2 blocks. I don't know how many square feet, but I mean, I listened to a 6-inch swale and a stone divider and pumps and collection points, and I think it's absurd, the volume of water that has to be removed. I mean, in good conscience, as a builder, I don't know how one could even consider constructing there when there is a very good likelihood that the new homeowner is going to have extreme problems. And what recourse will they have?
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
Is there someone else that would like to speak? Going, gone? Okay.
I can step on this.
Sure.
I always do my little list. Sorry.
Come up again?
Can you come up? Sorry. I always do notes. Sorry, excuse me. So what material is the shale made of? When you say your shale, I don't know.
Swale?
The swale.
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 Through the chair, grass,
So it's grass.
grass swale.
Okay, all right. So obviously, that's not permanent. It could be easily moved by water. I'm just, like, these are, I totally apologize, I'm in the medical field, not in the pure engineering. The lawn drain grate. So your recommendations was a 10-year storm, that if anything, it would overflow. And like you were predicting a 10-year storm, is that what I wrote down as far as amount of water?
We've been having a lot of 10-year storms, like, in a month.
10-year storm.
That's right.
There was huge storm, I can't
A lot
tell
of
you
hundreds
the
and
amount of
500s.
storms in 10 years that this overall flooding. So I don't feel as if your estimates are correct. And your cast iron pipe is a 6-inch, it's going to be below that, and so I thought of that as saying if it's a 6-inch pipe, we have all this water just filling into this area. Number one, I feel it should be bigger, and you're actually going into the sewerage of Milton itself. Am I correct in saying that? You'd actually have to open up a pipe, or?
It would be a storm drain, my understanding is, rather than the sewage. So it's a storm drain that can discharge into a river, as opposed to going to the waste treatment plant that we have.
Okay, so with that being said, when all these storms come about, that our sewerage system itself, that overflows consistently in that area.
You mean the sewer, the water comes up through the...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. That is, so there you have sewerage water there, and that has been 4 times, 4 major, and they weren't major storms. So the actuality is that you have stormwater drainage and also sewerage coming together in that area. I don't know if you're aware of this, but from being there all these years. And then if they have a sump pump, where does their water go? It can be totally filled as far as water itself. So my question was, where does that water go? And your maintenance system, roof guard system, that means that maintenance, who's doing the maintenance of that system? Because once once someone buys a home, they're not going to sign a contract. I'm going to sign this and say, yes, I will definitely, do my maintenance, because, life gets busy and you certainly forget. So those are my questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Beebe. Do either of my fellow,
I'm
yes,
sorry, I
come
have
up.
one more thing. I know I need to come back, okay. I tried getting information about underground water at the town, and I couldn't get anything. So I called the Department of Environmental Protection, and Heidi Davis sent me 2 maps, one that shows an underground river going from approximately between the library and the hospital to the corner of our little cul-de-sac area. And here is a map showing the 2 wetlands, and pretty much the underground river joins those 2. So the 2 areas in green are the wetlands that are still, at least according to the state, maybe not the town, the state still has designated them wetlands. And if you want me to point out the river on that map, because it's a little confusing with all the different lines, but the underground river is under there as well. So I just wanted to put that into the record.
Can we put these into the record?
Yes. We can keep these for
Oh, yeah.
the record.
I've got lots. You can even have this big poster board if you want. It's a little hard to fold, though.
Gee, Mary, do you have a place for that, to file it?
I do have a smaller one I can get you for the file.
Email it to you.
That works.
Yeah, that works.
Do you have any questions?
I was
of the
looking to see if I could
applicant,
find whether there was a decision on the division of the 15.
or- Of 15?
Because we were given copies of a decision but that was in 1960-something.
It was actually, I think, 1950 something.
Yeah, so I was looking to see if there was something, just to see what the conditions, if any, had been put into that special permit, if there was one that was issued.
Where is the, we do have the one for the,
Yeah, but that was a long time ago.
yeah.
29 size is in
Which-
the materials.
Which actually cleaned the way for that house to be built behind it. The Driscoll's old house.
Yeah, but we don't have the one that was, if there was one issued for the Chevrys
For the
house.
Chevrys house.
Right.
No, we do not.
Because I should imagine that in 1960, there might not have been the same kind of concern.
Well, there probably was not, and at that point, the public road, it was not a public road down there, so there was a taking. The land has
Yeah.
become less since then. Is that something that,
I was just
would be,
trying to see, if I was just trying to explain why I had my iPhone out, wasn't because I was checking my email. It was 'cause I was trying to get on the Norfolk County website.
Okay, do you have any questions?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Well, unless there's someone else that would like to speak or you'd like to wrap up, I know, why don't we do that right now?
I just wanted to know whether any of our engineers had any particular comments. I know there's a lot of information about some of the things they presented. If there's something that you wanted to add, if the board would be willing, I would say do so, but it's up to you.
Sure, the board would allow.
Yeah, with the microphone.
I'm sorry. Obviously, listening to the neighbors, we're well aware of the conditions that they have outlined. I don't dispute the information provided by the neighbors on their observations over the combined 50 years of ownership in the neighborhood here. This is a low area, we've acknowledged that. What you see, formation in the puddles and the photographs from our neighbor, that's what I would expect to see in this area. You have, based on our soil logs, you have a restrictive layer at the surface that holds water close to the surface. You get through that restrictive layer, you get into a sandier, more coarse, sandier material, where you get into the regular water table. The one thing I can't do is speak to other construction projects, the abutting project. Again, I can't defend what they've done. I can't give you a good answer as to why there's a problem and why you've had a problem. There are a lot of reasons that can occur. It could be a construction-related particular issue. You'll find in construction, if they use the wrong backfill material near the foundation, it becomes the weak point for water. Your downspouts are discharging water near the foundation. Where's it going to go? It's going to migrate the path of least resistance. Path of least resistance on most construction jobs, the contractors do sometimes a poor job backfilling near the foundation. It stays as a weak point, so the water drops off the roof, migrates down, gets into the basement. You end up with a bathtub because they've disturbed the area around your foundation. In this case, we have to obviously take that into account in the excavation process to protect the applicant's investment in this area. So again, I can't speak to other construction issues that may have occurred with our neighbors here or the other dwelling down the road. But what I can speak to is the contributing drainage. The abutter here, just up on Sias Lane, who talked about the crushed stone below the shed, the retaining walls, and the potential for how is this interceptor trench or these swales going to be effective. They're designed assuming that your water is coming onto us, not the other way around. You're up gradient, these folks are up gradient, this house is up gradient. It's been discussed that all that water is migrating here to a restricted layer soil conditions, which we're going to alter, and we're going to make it so it's not that restrictive layer, that it does have control points. And somebody mentioned the 10-year storm. As I said earlier, the 10-year storm doesn't sound like a big event. You haven't seen 5 inches of rain in 24 hours in a while. That's what that design is for in terms of what we have planned for in this area. So 5 inches of rain is an awful lot of water. You haven't seen that in these last 3 storm events. We had a lot more rain further south. You probably had a little bit more snow. But these heavy rainfall events we've been seeing, they don't rise to that level, and our design assumes it's going to rise to that level. So again, I know I'm not going to convince the folks in the neighborhood. All I can say is these are accepted design practice. I can't speak to houses that were built 15 years ago. As I said earlier in the presentation, soil evaluations are different today than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So the methodology for determining water table is not the same as I would venture to say any of the other homes in this neighborhood. So homes were historically built low. Builders didn't want to bring fill in, they didn't want to bring the property up, they didn't want to bring the utilities up. That has changed with the soil laws and DEP's methodology for determining seasonal high groundwater. Someone mentioned wastewater backing up. You'll see that in older urban areas where you have sanitary sewers, people are connected to them, You get a heavy rainfall event, their sump pumps kick on, there are illegal connections of the sump pumps into the sanitary system, it overloads the sanitary system. It's what's referred to as either infiltration, because we have old pipes and the pipes are leaking, or you have inflow that is not supposed to be there, which is typically people with sump pumps that illegally discharge to the sanitary sewer system. People think they're helping themselves, but they're actually contributing to problems at the wastewater treatment plant, and they overwhelm the capacity of the wastewater lines. You can check with your DPW. You'll see an incredible spike in wastewater flow during rainfall events because of these illegal connections or the older piping system. So I don't dispute the individual who indicated that there is maybe wastewater overtopping at storm events, and you have that mingling of stormwater and wastewater. I don't doubt that for a minute. A lot of urban areas have that problem because they're older systems, older pipes, and illegal connections from homeowners who think they're helping their situation, but are actually contributing to a different problem. So beyond that, I'm not sure I can add more from the original presentation unless the board members
You can answer a question for
have
me.
a
because
comment.
I think that we have to do another
You
question.
haven't talked about the north side, which is what I'm on, which will be now, if you build the lowest point in all of this area, if you build up that property. So great, you've built all of these things and they're all going to catch all of the water, and in a perfect world, that's lovely and awesome. But when people move in and they don't fix the things or clean out the things, guess where all that water is going to go? Into the lowest point, because that's what water does. So what is it that is going to happen to our property?
Again, that was in the original presentation. The original presentation was your lot and this area here kind of share this low spot down in the corner, and you drain partially onto the applicant's property into this low spot, and we're going to make that an area where we can collect the water and not let it just sit there. Again, the pictures that were handed in, it's a bowl. The water is going to sit there, it's going to fill up. I don't dispute those pictures for a second. As a storm event evolves, that water level is going to pick up in that area. You've got restricted soils, it's not allowing infiltration. We're altering that dynamic by putting in this lawn drain and having an area that can create a positive overflow from that inflow of water from the surrounding areas. As I said, our roof drains are going into recharge. We have positive overflows for everything. The design anticipates multiple ways of the water being conveyed, handled, recharged, or discharged into the drainage system. So it is different from what you experience today, because you don't have a drain in there now. You have a bathtub that is on this.
I don't have a bathtub.
No, this, what I'm,
I don't
if I may answer the question, you raised the question. It is a bathtub in that area.
Yes.
When I say you, I mean in this adjacent area here that you contribute to, 11 contributes to, contributions from here. As the owner here has indicated, they may have dammed this up, so I'm not sure how much water originates from this parcel, but there are more than one source of water that comes to this area. It goes into a bathtub at the present time, temporary floods, and slowly seeps back into the ground as time goes on. The system won't act that way when we're done.
Thank you.
Did you guarantee that? You said that it would be better. Can you guarantee that?
I am going to guarantee that it has less flooding capability after we're done than it does today, yes. Am I going to improve your basement issue? I can't answer that, probably not. Your basement is probably the result of your house being built too low. It could be the result of your house being built incorrectly with the improper backfill. Those are things I can't critique and I can't question because I'm not privy to what your house really looks like. I haven't even been on your property, so it would be unfair for me to represent that I can explain how your issue is going to be better. What I can say is the control of the water will be better than it exists today. So yes, I can definitely say that.
Good luck with that.
So what you're saying is that you're going to guarantee that I'm going to get not 1 ounce of water more than I do now?
I can't answer the question any other way. I've answered the question 3 times now.
That you guarantee it?
I think that might go beyond the scope of this meeting.
We're only talking about this property.
Yeah, yeah. Wrap up?
Well, as you can see, the issue for the neighbors is drainage especially, and that is why we have a drainage engineer, a stormwater management engineer here. That's why we have an environmental engineer who studied the property. It's a good plan in terms of controlling drainage and keeping additional drainage from being, drainage flow off neighbors' lots. The reason we've gone to all this effort is to show that it is possible to construct a house here and to construct a proper drainage engineering system. It's pretty complicated because there are various issues, as you've heard from everybody. That's what you have to do in order to propose something like this in this sort of setting and say that there will not be substantial detriment as a result of building the house for stormwater drainage issues. And you know, that is the guarantee is that there will be no additional stormwater flow onto neighboring lots. That's what you can do. If we couldn't do that, we wouldn't be here. If we couldn't present such a plan to you, we wouldn't have even come to the Board of Appeals and applied for this permit. And it's been a pretty long process of study resulting in the plan that you have before you. I know how difficult it is, and I'm in a neighborhood too, and I know that everyone is afraid that this may not work. So I understand that you have a difficult job. Maybe not so difficult, maybe it's easy because so many people are opposed. I think I'd like to recap just briefly my comments on the zoning. We have a provision in our zoning bylaw allowing subdivision of a lot of this size into 2 lots if you have at least 60 feet of frontage and you have at least 6,000 square feet of area. It is not illegal to come and apply for this. We're not looking for a variance. We're looking for a special permit. So as far as the zoning goes, it has been possible since 1970, when the town took that little strip of land, to apply for a special permit to subdivide this lot from a zoning perspective. Before that, it could have been done by right, and nobody would have had to put in any drainage systems. And even now, you know, it's not a requirement that we put in a drainage system, but it's a necessity because of the existing conditions. Maybe it's counterintuitive, but sometimes doing some building and doing the appropriate engineering and using a very capable engineering company to design the drainage is a benefit and not a detriment. And that's basically what the position of this application is, that we can do a good job, we can put an attractive home, it will fit in with the neighborhood, and it will not increase the drainage problem for the neighbors. I know the water, we all know, I've lived here for 40 years, and I know the water in this neighborhood comes from a lot of different sources. I think the engineer has tried to describe some of that to you. I guess I'd ask the board if they'd be willing to provide some discussion before you close the hearing so that the applicant can make a decision as to how to proceed. I would appreciate that.
You would like to continue this until another evening? Is that
No, I think she was just saying
No,
she
I'd
doesn't
just
want
like
to
to
close the
hear
hearing while we deliberate.
discussion.
So she doesn't want to.
Oh, okay.
If we close the hearing,
Okay,
then
fine.
she can't put any more information
Fine,
in.
gotcha.
If she listens to us talk about it.
Yep, okay.
While the hearing's still open, she can chime in.
Okay, well, I think I will leave it open so that that can happen, but we will deliberate now. Let me just, before we even start to deliberate, I would like to say that I know everybody that's in this room is a good person, is trying to do something yes, to make some money, but also to do something for the good of the neighborhood, whether that be make the water issue better, or if somebody's not so sure that that's going to happen, they want to preserve the level of problems that they already have with the water. They would rather have that not be there. They don't want to figure out what would be happening with it rather than without. I understand that. I think we have our homes that are, usually our largest investment, and I'm very aware of that, and I'm thinking about that in all of my just thinking in my own head, and as we talk about it, I will continue to think about it. This is a difficult case. When I first came in here, like I say, I was very familiar with the neighborhood, and I knew that lake. I used to walk through that and pretend I was at the beach when I was a very little girl. So I understand that. It is a difficult area. Okay, that being said, I appreciate the civility that everybody has treated them with. I know this is a hard situation, and it could have been ugly, and it wasn't. So with that in mind, we are going to deliberate, and I think it does need to be a little bit more of a discussion because it is a hard one. I'm certainly concerned about that water. It does need to go someplace. We do have some professionals that are telling us that this will not make anyone else's problem worse with the water. And I know that that's a very hard thing to be able to say. And I appreciate that people may not want to believe it. I mean, I have trouble with it too. I'm always questioning these things. So that is a concern. If we could, maybe in time we will be able to have history on this, and we can see that these things work. I don't know that we're there right now. I know that you are. What we have to look at is that this is going to be something that's not a detriment to the neighborhood. And I understand that as a matter of right, I understand that. But it did happen. They paved the road. And so we do have to look at whether this is in the best interest of the neighborhood and that it's not a detriment to the neighborhood. I am concerned that there is going to be, more, excavation done, and there's less soil there, just as a matter of fact, to absorb things. I realize that these things to ameliorate that, they sound good. They sound good. I don't know how they work, and I have to rely on people that know how they work. I have to rely on people that see what this is like, and I know that it can be a huge lake, which brings up the idea of what is too much for an area. I mean, oftentimes, traditionally we did not build in wetlands. Is this a wetland? Maybe, maybe not. I think probably not. But is it an area that should be built in? That's a question that I do have. So I'd like to hear my colleagues' comments on this.
Well, it's interesting when you think about stormwater. I mean, most of the regulations talk about the fact that your construction can't, generate stormwater off of your lot onto somebody else's. That's kind of the way the regulations work. In this situation, essentially, you're taking away the neighborhood drain by putting a house on it. So while your project is not going to be generating water on somebody else's, the problem is that you're taking away essentially the sponge for everybody else's property, which is a nice service, of course, to provide, but not at these kinds of prices. That's my concern, is that you're dealing with the water that you think you're going to be generating, with your lot coverage, but you're not really dealing with the water that's coming from all these other points to this property, is what I'm concerned about. Is that I know enough about construction and about stormwater and drainage and all these sorts of things to know that, yes, the things that you've proposed are great, but my concern is that you're not dealing with all the flow from everybody else's properties into this. You calculated flow and water level in your lot.
Well, we have looked at the contributing drainage area to the lot, so that does include adjacent parcels. So we have taken into account that there is water that does collect there from the adjacent parcels, particularly here, coming off, obviously off the upper portion of our lot. I assume that there was water coming from this lot as well. The individual who owns it says, no, that's not the case, but I assume that there was water coming here, and I also assume there was some water coming from these folks here. So that was taken into account when we did look at the numbers, to come up with our analysis.
Excuse me, if I don't mind, there is water still coming along that, but not as much over the years. Yeah, but there still is quite a bit.
Now, let me ask a question of you. We talked about an underground river, and it is there. Has your calculation taken that into account as well?
Well, when we talk about an underground river, we're usually talking about the movement of the aquifer in a certain fashion. And so, yes, it takes into account that the aquifer, the true aquifer occurs and begins at a fairly high level in this area, and that high level is around the 4-foot mark underneath the site. So we have elevated our recharge system above that aquifer level, which is where the water is migrating. We've replaced the restrictive layer below our recharge system, so our water can then migrate from our recharge system into that lower level without being impeded by the more dense soil particles that are above. So yes, we have taken that into account in the placement of our system on the property.
And so it's what the water table is all around, like more than just the neighbors that might be here, but some other people a couple of blocks away. I think we heard that was part of it as well. So that would take care of...
There's water, yeah, there's water migrating from the upgrading areas and flowing through this entire area. And that migration of flow is fairly shallow, there's no question. And that's obviously why everybody has basement problems at seasonal high water periods, is during the seasonal high water, that water table's 3 to 4 feet below the surface that you see out there today pretty uniformly through this area. And that's a function of the water from the upgrading areas and how it's migrating through this particular portion of the town.
Okay. Any more thoughts?
And my only thought is that if this was a bit more square footage, and this is not a reflection on anybody's properties or what's been said, but if the size was a little bit different, a little bit bigger, there would be no prohibition against building on this. And it sounds like, taking into consideration everything that you've done, you've alleviated the concerns that the building of this lot would take care of. And now we're just deciding whether or not the square footage size to have a technical variance or not would come into play. That's where my thinking is. We're going on the technicality of how the parcel of the property, whereas that's not really playing into whether or not this water is going to be displaced or not. But your remedy does.
This is a very tough one.
Because, I mean, you know, as you said, when you think about the, detriment to the neighborhood, the fact of the matter is that right now, you just got this, like at the lake, or not, and potentially, one could argue, that this system that these people are proposing addresses and corrects an existing situation. But I'm also mindful of the fact that I don't want to have somebody buying this house that's going to end up having to replace their basement every time we have a storm.
Can we really consider this new owner, this hypothetical owner that
Not
may-
really.
No. I mean, they have to do their due diligence.
Right.
I think we can only consider.
I mean, I think we should, if we decided to give this permit, I think we would have to put in substantial conditions.
Oh, absolutely.
So, we would want to make sure, the conditions that are in those plans, the conditions for maintenance of trees and screening to the necessary, to the extent possible, being mindful of the fact that, lots in here are all kind of pretty small. I mean, they're like my neighborhood too.
Yeah.
Where you want to make sure that you have the screening and that sort of thing that keep as much of the tree coverage as you could. And to make sure that, I don't think he's got it there now, but the condition is to address the flow of water from 11 onto the lot by putting in necessary drainage and pea stone and that sort of thing. So I think that it would have to be substantial conditions.
And those conditions could be the mechanism to enforce.
Yeah. I mean, they'd be very similar to the.
There would be a remedy.
Right.
So I'm hearing,
So I could go ahead with it if we put in conditions
Uh-huh.
that required, compliance with and maintenance. I mean, as everybody has said, I mean, you can't, promise that somebody owning the house 5-10 years from now is going to
that's
remember
correct.
to do that.
But as long as there's some kind of a
But the building inspector can enforce it.
There's an enforcement mechanism,
Yeah.
and then there's a remedy.
The deed, too.
You have to-
Yeah. But as I said, so if there were conditions, I'd consider it.
I could add, if you allow me to, I don't know what phase you're in at this point, to say that, again, I'm thinking of Conservation Commission because this is where these issues tend to get
Or
discussed.
40Bs, which is my,
There can also be there can be language in a deed referencing the special permit and the conditions, or however you want to put it.
well, the special permit gets recorded.
Yeah, I mean, it's on record, so I don't think it's necessary, and my preference isn't really to put it in as a deed restriction because it's already in the special permit. I'm just suggesting that if for some reason that gives you more comfort, sometimes the planning board does that.
Yeah, but then your problem you have with that is that zoning can last forever, special permits can last forever, the deed restriction can expire in 30 years, so that doesn't do me much good.
That's right.
I see we have a new person to the conversation. If you would like to come up and speak into a.
Good evening. I'll make my comments very briefly. My name is Lynn Norton. I'm at 42 Center Lane, so I think 4 houses down from the proposed spot. I'm just concerned hearing the deliberations, thinking that we're maybe losing sight of the forest through the trees. So this doesn't meet the technical requirements, we understand that. But if you're looking for substantial detriment, I don't know that you need to look further than this photograph. So yes, while we're hearing that you can control stormwater, or better control stormwater, that doesn't speak to what happens during the excavation in the building. This photograph was taken 2 weeks post-build. And so the immediate issue is not going to be solved by what's happening during the course of the construction. And if this doesn't represent substantial detriment, or kayaking down Center Lane, and we're willing to take a guess on maybe well-informed information, but it's just a guess. Nobody knows whether this house had those bells and whistles. They may not have, they may have, and this is what happens. And we can't say with certainty that all of the houses that were constructed didn't have these types of things. And maybe the EPA did change its requirements, maybe soil testing has become more advanced. But to me, this is what you're dealing with. This is a substantial detriment. And I think we're trying to outweigh this, which is a very real, known risk, with something that we're willing to speculate upon that may or may not work. And it's not about the eventual buyer, it's about the existing abutters and neighbors. So this may well be outside the scope of who buys that house and whether we need to be concerned about it. We're concerned about the people in this room and on that petition and down the street. And so I don't want to lose sight of the forest or the trees, and I fear that that may be happening.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we can only deal with, we can only deal with what the application is, which is a special permit to subdivide the property. So there's lots of issues that are here that are not, unfortunately.
I'm sorry?
There are lots of issues that are here that are not, unfortunately, part of the application.
They're going to exist anyway.
Right.
The question is whether
You get a special permit to.
this special permit is going to make that difference or not. I have one question about the trees. I don't recall, and I apologize. The trees that were discussed as being on one of the properties, are they going to be taken away during this proposal?
To do the grading for the lot, we will have to do the removal, obviously the removal of the trees with the house, the driveway, the recharge. So yeah, there'll be a regrading of this area which would eliminate the trees.
And you've
in those
taken that
areas.
into consideration with the water flow issues?
Yes.
Okay, okay, that's my question.
Can I answer that question? Having lived there for 23 years, as I said, there were 17 hemlock trees down one side of the property and an equal number of maple trees down the other side of the property. And then in the middle of the property, previous owners in that lake area had planted several trees that have now grown to full adult height.
I'm concerned about the detriment to the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm very concerned about it. I don't doubt you at all. But if this fails for whatever reason, it does impact a lot of people and rather significantly.
Agreed.
Like I say, if it's without detriment, but I can't certify that it's not going to be without detriment to the neighborhood.
No, we don't want to be in that business.
I can't do that. I would love to, but I can't.
Yeah.
So right now, my tendency is to vote against the application. Was mindful that we need to have a full complement to either pass it or it doesn't pass. So.
The disadvantage of having only 3 on the panel.
Well, then we'd have too much talking, wouldn't we? So, I'm just seeing that there's the potential for just an awful lot of neighbor destruction, and I just can't see that it's going to be something that's not going to be a detriment to the neighborhood. I'm mindful of how you said that the plug, the stopper for we're going to be putting in a stopper for that, and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. Yes?
I think you would have the most experience having lived there.
That's exactly what I'm thinking of, yes.
We know. I mean, I don't have all this language and expertise, but we've seen what we've seen.
And I have too, and I can't.
So you know.
Yes,
What years did you live there?
55 to 68.
So there you are. And then I came in shortly, and Mrs. Carlson did in the late 70s, and
So why build another house that's going to cause
Why do it
the same
again?
kind of problems that we've seen for all these years?
I'm just feeling that we're kind of getting to the point where it can't sustain another house there. Not and have the quality of life that people want to have on Central Lane. Is there something new you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm a perfect example of that. Lived here, built on a subdivided lot on the south section of this property. I'm your visual aid. gave you a rundown of exactly what we had purchased, what we had done. Sure, you can turn around and tell me we had the wrong backfill and all these other issues, but I trust that the Sullivan Brothers Norfolk Development and engineers that came in to bring in 29 yards of soil afterwards, that the house was purchased to crown it, and all of the things that they did, I watched the elevation of our system that was in there that failed to be upgraded. I saw it. I let you know that I spent $39,900 over the asking price of the house to do these things to remedy what is already there. I tell you that it would be a detriment, not just to me, but to the neighbors.
We have all that crushed stone and dry wells underneath every downspout.
I mean, I can't give you a rundown of the exact things that they actually did that I could put into record. I could only go over the thoughts and the invoices in which I have in a file that I had to go through, and then get expertise from my wife on the exact things, because my job had taken me through North America, that I didn't see everything, but I did see improvement from the things that they did. So I would tell you, if you're gonna upgrade and you're gonna grade that property and you're gonna lift it up, it still has to go somewhere. So now, if you're grading to the sidewalk, does it now pull into Center Lane? Does it go across the street and get those neighbors on the other side? The gravity of that area, I caution you to take a drive down there and take a look at it and imagine, and use some imagination of what will happen in that magical area there. And I think it's more than storm water drains. That's what I would tell you. And I think it would be a detriment. Where it goes, it has to go somewhere. Left, right, back, forward.
Thank you.
Well, I think we have to take that vote. Are we ready for that?
Yeah.
All those in favor of allowing the application, say aye. All those against the application, say no.
No.
No. I'm sorry. It was a tough one, very tough, I will say that.
Well, thank you. Now, thank you for listening to us and listening to the full presentation. We appreciate it. We understand the neighbors' concerns. We're sorry that they don't agree with us, that this might actually improve things, but I understand your position. Thank you.
Oh, good, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. No, I'm going to tell you no. Do you want to do this one? Well, maybe I should, since I'm the one that lived there.
Thanks for doing that.
Maybe not.
Would it be possible to get a copy of, not today, of his proposal? Because we have our own soil person that,
So it's kind of a peer review sort of thing?
like,
The record will be available, it's a public record. It'll be available.
The decision after that will be in my hands.
See Mary Fitzgerald.
Get a copy of anything.
okay, and you're in the plan, is that?
Kathleen O'Donnell.
Oh, okay. No, but
Did you call today?
No, we didn't introduce ourselves.
Oh, like we did. And I'm with your,
Judy Donahue
size
came.
of this.
Good to meet you. Thank you.
It doesn't rent very well.
No. Teresa's ladies' room.
Oh, I didn't get this in here.
It's all right, I don't need a picture.
let alone
Any of your time, but I
Where are you? I could run across the street.
I also want to say that we only lived here the house is this? Spectacular neighbors.
Good luck.
I like telling her you should never have a broker tell you that can't be built on. I never told her that.
To listen to that? Yeah, really?
No.
There's always a way. I mean, even when it's conservation land. Come on, you know what? So you think I should not do this one?
Somebody thinking that because you're in the neighborhood. That's all. You know.
Well, yeah. Let me do that.
Welcome. That's the decision you have to sign. Don't forget that.
Let me do it now because I will forget it. So, that's okay. We're just getting things done anyway. So,
You all set with that or no?
no, I
How was your vacation? I know. Can he?
recharge my.
Sit over here.
Put some caffeine in there.
Yeah, I think
It's a tough one.
it was a very tough one. Very tough one. I mean, I feel bad for somebody that would buy it and has the.
Okay.
You want to wait till the end to do those?
Yes, please.
Hey, how are you?
What do we do with the exhibits that they've given us? Just keep them?
What was that? The
Exhibits with the handout.
Recycle them.
yeah.
Recycle.
I tend to do that.
I'll have to wait the 15-minute rule now.
No, because
Oh,
we're
no,
way
no,
over.
We're way over that.
Okay.
Small things.
Okay, I think we're finally ready for our 8 o'clock hearing. Yes, on the application of Michael Modestino, attorney for the Mignosa 1983 Family Trust, the applicant, owner and operator of the Milton Marketplace, located at 10 Bassett Street, Milton, which is located partially in a Residence C and partially in a business district. The applicant seeks an amendment to the variance granted over the property in 1982 in order to allow 10 parking stacker structures to be installed in the rear parking lot for employee parking only. The structures will be 13.4 feet from the right side lot line. Detailed information on this matter can be found with, she's got the tape. Did she get the tape going, yeah?
She did press it.
Oh, okay. Is open for inspection should people want to do that. I'm Virginia Donahue King. I'm the acting chairman tonight, and with me are board members Kathleen O'Donnell and Teresa Quijano. Quijano, okay. We just met today. So as well with the, I'm sorry. In the file, we have an application from the Mignosa Trust. We have a letter denying the request to build such from our building commissioner, Joe Prondak, and suggests that that you come to see the Board of Appeals on allowing that. We have a plot plan based, do we have a date on it? Oh, yes, we do. October 26, 2017, by DeSell and Burke. And we have a view from the sky, a photo from the sky of the subject area. And we also have an email from, let's see, from Town Council John Flynn to Mr. Prondak, saying that his opinion, his legal opinion, is the proposed structures are not permitted as of right. The applicant should apply to the Board of Appeals to seek an amendment for the existing variance to allow the structure to be installed on the property. Implicit in that process is a determination by the Board of Appeals regarding whether amendment of the variance is required or whether installation of the structures is within the scope of the existing variance. Because of the size of the structures, the applicant needs to obtain a site plan approval from the Board of Appeals. So, those are all open to inspection, and now I welcome you to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
And just the rules are that we need to talk into a microphone if anybody's talking or wants to ask questions of the applicant during the process of the meeting. So,
If I may.
I'll turn it over to you.
Michael Modestino, I represent the applicant, and with me is Steve DeGiusto. Michael McNoser is the trustee of the 1983 Family Trust, but he's out of town, so Steve has agreed to be here this evening to explain any issues that may come up during the course of this presentation. From a procedural standpoint, we had applied for this permit back in October. And the planning board had a hearing on it, and then town council got involved. Initially, Commissioner Prondak felt that we should be going for a site plan review with the planning board, and we did that. We had one hearing on it. The matter was continued. And then we had an opinion from town council at the request of the chairperson, Mr. Whiteside of the planning board. And town council, you have the letter, indicates that they felt that we should get an amendment to the existing variance or apply for an amendment to the existing variance before we went back before the planning board. So the planning board matter is on hold until we are heard by this board. And if I may explain, I represent the trustees of the Family Trust. It's an application for an amendment to the existing variance that was issued in 1982. And that was, done in a residential, know that. A small portion of the lot is in a commercial area. And we've had to come back before this board and other boards on various times for different improvements and things that have been done to the Milton Marketplace. What we're proposing now is installing parking stackers. And the parking stackers consist of 10 units in total that would handle up to 20 vehicles. And it would be for employee parking only, not for customer parking. And the
Thank
idea...
goodness.
Thank you.
As a patron of Milton Marketplace, thank goodness.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to put anybody through that. But the idea would be to have security officers monitor the stackers at all times. The public or customers would not have any access whatsoever. Only the security officers would be able to operate the machinery. I have some photographs of what these parking stackers look like
Good.
that I can circulate. I think I have a set for everybody.
Thank you.
I also have some informative information from the Park Plus, the manufacturer, that you may want to take a look at. It gives some specifications on the parking stackers. As I indicated, the parking stackers are manufactured by Park Plus of Fairview, New Jersey. At one of the planning board hearings, the manufacturer's representative appeared and gave some explanation about safety features, about noise levels and all of that. I think I can summarize some of that. The units are powered by a hydraulic power. They utilize biodegradable vegetable oil and have a heater for colder months, colder weather, to keep the viscosity level down. The parking stackers are operated by a 10 horsepower motor that is approximately 3 feet by 3 feet in size and will be enclosed in a containment-type shelter that is 6 feet by 4 feet. I think you have a photograph.
Is that the
of
yellow structure?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is the containment structure, and that would also shelter some of the noise level. It's been indicated that the noise level would be 59 or 60 decibels. That means practically nothing to me, but it's been described to me that it would sound like a telephone ringing, a normal conversation, nothing louder than that. Would also be, it would be muffled to some degree by the shelter that it's going to be housed in. In addition to that, and really as a result of concerns of the residents that we heard at the planning board meeting, we came up with a landscaping plan that I'd like to circulate. The landscaping, this is an enhanced landscaping plan. We had one previously, but now we have the trees, arborvitaes, going around the backside and making the corner behind the property at the back lot line. And then we have the trees going up Antwerp Street, because we heard at the planning board hearing that a number of the neighbors on Antwerp Street were very concerned about looking at these parking stackers, and they wanted to be shielded from them as much as possible. So we come up with a plan to install 37 arborvitaes with 33 hydrangeas that would be situated in between. The average size of the arborvitaes would be 12 to 14 feet in height.
Where's the structure? Where's the?
Yeah, we're just trying to orient ourselves here. Is this, is this kind of like the larger structure here? There's a big
Yes.
parking lot here, and then this is kind of around the back, is that?
Yeah, which where
Okay.
the trucks come in.
Conceptual
Okay.
plan that I think you might have.
So where
Oh,
is
do
the
I?
stacking, the car stackers?
Going to go behind the building.
Yes, going to go behind the building on the right-hand side, directly behind the building at the far right.
So where
lot line.
the trucks now come in?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the store is over here. This is the main entrance to that parking lot.
Yep.
So the Antwerp people are over here. So that's what they're talking about, putting more landscaping in this way.
We don't see it,
So they don't see it because they're houses all over here. Bassett Street's over this way.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Very good at visualizing.
Yes.
So these arborvitaes are 12 to 14 feet from the outset. They could grow as high as 15 to 18 feet. Obviously, the stockade fence is only about 8 feet.
Right.
But this would help shield the neighbors from looking at this site. And it would also muffle any further noise emanating. The idea would be to put that yellow container somewhere behind the building, but not right at the parking stackers. It would be closer to the building itself.
Well, you already have trucks going back in there.
Right.
And they make their own noise, so,
That's correct.
you know.
That's correct.
And then I guess the other question, so is the stacker on the height, it doesn't come up higher than the building itself?
Not higher than the building, but certainly higher than the existing stockade fence.
Sure. Okay.
In fact, the height would be 10.6 at the lowest level, depending upon the size of the vehicle. The idea would be to put sedans on the top, smaller
Oh,
cars.
sure, not the SUVs.
And SUVs and sedans, and larger sedans would bring it up to 12.2. Large SUV would be 14 feet. We would never put a large SUV up there. The idea would be to put small vehicles up there. And it's also important to note that this would only be used, in the morning, after 8 o'clock, nothing before 8 o'clock, and then everything would be done before 8 o'clock. The idea would be to get full-time employees that are there from 8 to 5, 8 to 4, and have them park, try to minimize the noise from these things going up and down. Now, we spoke to Audrey Devon out in the corridor tonight, and she indicated that, these things are going to be going up and down at various times of the day. We hope not. The idea would be to try to minimize the times that these things have to go up and down. There is some noise when they come off of the aluminum stackers. Not a lot of noise, but there is some noise. There were also concerns voiced over safety, and we listened to those concerns. The power pack that would be housed in that yellow structure has a lock on it, and every machine has a key switch. So there's 10 stackers, each one of them would have a key switch. No one other than security would have access to the switches of the keys. When not in use, they'll be in a down or flattened position, which I think you see in one of the photographs there. Again, we're not going to use them before 8 o'clock or after 8 o'clock. The idea is to free up 10 parking spaces so that we can have customers that's going for a half an hour, utilize those 10 parking spaces that would be freed up. Obviously, there's a parking crunch in East Milton. The Fruit Center and the McNoses have been trying to deal with it for years. They've tried to come up with various solutions. Some of them the neighbors haven't liked, so we've backed off from them. We were going to acquire a lot one time to put parking in there, and the neighbors didn't like it, and we backed away from it. I mean, really, we're not asking for a tremendous amount here. We're asking for some relief to deal with this parking situation. There's also some neighbors are going to be offended by it. They're not going to want to look out at these structures. We're hoping that the shielding of these units will make it so that they don't have to look at it. Mrs. Devon doesn't have to look out her, her window and look at these stackers. That's what we want to do. Went over the landscaping plan with her. She had some concern that the arborvitaes might not come up as far as her property, and we assured her that we would make certain that the trees came up to shield the properties on Antwerp Street. In addition to that, we spoke to Mr. Dunn. I'm sure you hear from him. He's been instrumental in getting us to do some of these things that are in these current plans, and he would like to see some kind of light on these stackers. And we even discussed a motion light to keep kids away, so that if somebody went near the stackers, a motion light would go on. And, that's certainly something that we would consider doing. No one would have access to any of these keys or switches or anything like that, and they would be in the down position after 8 o'clock at night.
So you're sort of limiting the hours 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay. And
More likely that it's going to be 8 to 5, but somebody
Yeah.
could straggle after 5 o'clock.
But I guess my question is, what's the division between what we are doing here, which is just amending the variance, and then the planning board is going to do site plan review, and they're going to put
They're
in
gonna look at the whole
all
picture.
that sort of stuff. So really what you're coming for us to
It's
is
just an
to say
amendment.
an amendment to the variance that would allow this particular construction.
Right.
So I went online, the registry, and I checked the whole history of the variances that have been issued over the years. I mean, you've had to get them when you put in the new pad for the carol, for the carts. I mean, it's been like everything that you've remotely wanted to do has had to require a variance, hence John
That is
Flynn's
correct.
decision. So I think that's all we're being asked to do. And then the planning
They get
board
to put the
can do all that.
conditions.
Yeah, right. I think that's how I was thinking. Do you agree?
Yes.
And I would merely point out that we offered the planning board members to go and look at some of these sites. There's one at the Mass General Hospital, there's another one up on Route 9 in Chestnut Hill. I've gone out there and looked at them, and I've listened to them myself, and you'd have to be the judge of that, but I don't think they're that unsightly, and I don't think they're that noisy. And I think they're very practical.
As I said, I don't think they make any more noise than a truck.
Right.
And you've got those coming back into that end of the parking lot all the time, too.
And we know that there's a difficult balance between this property and the residential neighbors in East Milton Square. And we're not going to please them all the time, but we try to, and we try to listen to them. And we think this strikes a balance, and it will ease the parking situation if it's allowed.
Okay. Is that your presentation?
I would only say that, we did look at some other areas of trying to shield, what people might think is an unsightly view of the stackers. And frankly, and I can show you this, there are the manufacturer's rep gave us some ideas, and I can spread them around. And it's more of an industrial look to it, and we just don't think that it would work in this neighborhood. It might be something that you'd see in downtown Boston, the shielding of these units.
Kind of like a cage?
Looks like a cage.
Cage for your car.
Oop.
I think those
There
are
you go.
both, yeah.
And we also explored the idea of perhaps making a wooden structure on top of the parking stackers, but we thought it would be too big and it would be a little bit unsightly. So we think that the shielding method that we're coming up with the vegetation would work better.
Okay.
I've seen them for boats, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody that would like to speak in favor of the application?
Hi, my name is Peter Dunn. I live at 84 Franklin Street. I'm one of the abutters. I have met with Michael Mignosa on a number of occasions, and a lot of the, I think, rules and restrictions that were outlined by Mr. Modestino are pretty much along the lines of what we spoke about. I understand that the neighbors have some concerns on Antwerp Street, so I'm hoping that those concerns can be addressed to their satisfaction. But what we've talked about, so subject to their satisfaction, we talked about the putting the motor in the shed with the location by the building, and that's really for the sound. The locks that we talked about, because there are a lot of kids in the neighborhood, that's important for safety. The appearance with the trees, I think we just want to make sure that they're tall enough to actually block this thing out of the gate, and appreciate the sedans being the ones that would go on there and not the SUVs. The usage restricted to the employees. I think the hours generally mimic what the hours are for the truck deliveries, which they've been good about adhering to, and restricting it to the employees. And I think, with those types of restrictions, that and the other concerns of the neighbors being addressed, I think that's what we've been talking about with Michael, and I think that would be acceptable for me.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dunn.
Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone that wants to ask some questions of the applicant or speak against the application? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Audrey Devon. I live at 94 Antwerp Street, and I know they've addressed most of the issues that the neighbors have, which leads me just to say that it's a residential neighborhood. I don't think this type of structure belongs in our backyard. It's just not conducive to a neighborhood. They told me they would add more trees so that we were completely blocked, which is great. But just the idea of this type of structure in our backyards just doesn't sit well. We're not in the middle of a city. We're not surrounded by apartment buildings or hospitals or parking garages. This is our home. Everybody around there takes care of their property. Mr. McNosa takes impeccable care of his property. I just don't see this in the middle of our backyard. They've addressed all the appearances and safety issues, and all that's well and good. I just, that's how I feel. It's our neighborhood. And this is a metal structure that's gonna be in the back lot. We're gonna see it. Hopefully we won't if they, landscape it the way they say we will, but we'll still know it's there. You see it as soon as you walk into the Fruit Center parking lot, and if you go a little bit farther down, you'll see it. Everybody will see it. I know parking is a huge issue in our area. My street gets cars parked on it because people don't want to go into the Fruit Center and deal with the craziness of the parking lot, so they park on the street. They run in to get their errands, they come back, they leave. The trucks are coming down our street to go into the back lot, which they weren't aware of, which I told them tonight. So they said they would, address that issue, which is great. So we sort of have issues in the front of our houses, now we have issues in the back of our houses. There's just so much activity back there, some days it's just too much. You can't sit in your backyard and enjoy any peace and quiet and relax. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Elaine Hahn. I'm at 84 Antwerp Street. Basically, what Audrey Devon said, I say the same. I mean, the fruit center is wonderful. I think anyone who lives in Milton probably goes there constantly. I go up there, I walk up there every week, maybe a couple times a week. It's wonderful. It really is. It helps the neighborhood. Everybody loves it. And it has the pros and it has the cons, and the cons is all the traffic. I feel for everybody at the fruit center that works there of the parking. I mean, Milton is just not helping out with the parking. And I feel the fruit center does everything they can in their power to try to come up with ideas. But this one, I'm right at the corner, I'm gonna stare at it. I have pictures, I happened to take some one day, after one of the snowstorms. I look out onto it. My house is higher than the parking lot, so there's an 8-foot fence. I have pictures of the snow that gets piled up back there, and it's feet above that fence. And I can stare right onto the other part at Franklin. And I just think the height of the trees, the height of the bushes, I don't think it's going to help. I'm going to be staring at it. And I just don't think it's part of a residential neighborhood. I wish I knew what the answer was for parking. I just think the town doesn't even do enough to help. And I just don't think it belongs in the backyard. One day, Saturday, I was out, and there were trucks coming. I think because of the storms we've had, they've had to come maybe Saturdays to do the trash. I was out picking up my yard, and I hear all this noise, and I look up because I'm figuring it's got to be more of the planes coming by. But it wasn't. It was the trash trucks coming in, and they took maybe 20 minutes to a half hour. And I know you're going to try to cut down on the amount of noise, but just trying to be out in your backyard, you can't enjoy it anymore. And it's not the fruit center's fault. It really isn't. But something needs to be done, and I think the fruit center does what they can, but I also think the town needs to help out. But I don't think a structure like this belongs in our backyard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Given that everybody in the room has spoken, I think I don't have to ask my question again on if there's anyone that wants to speak. Would you like to wrap up in any way, or?
Yeah, we certainly respect the opinions and the views of these residents that were here tonight, and we want to shield them as much as possible from looking at these things. I would only point out that I don't think they're as bad as they're being made out to be. You know, this is a parking lot, and it is what it is. Trucks are going through there. And again, I'm not minimizing their concerns. They're legitimate concerns. Mrs. Devon said to us tonight about, she was concerned about trucks. They showed us a picture of a truck that was parked out on Antwerp Street, and that's not with the store's permission, and they're going to put a stop to that. They don't want vehicles that are shopping in the store parking out there, and maybe the town and the fruit center need to get together to do something about that. And those are all very legitimate concerns. But, I mean, the snow getting piled up, it only happens maybe, 3 times a year or so when things get that bad, and we try to, if it gets too bad, they remove the snow. But I do think that, we're trying to strike a balance here, and I think that this is a worthwhile thing to try to pursue. We're not talking about putting these things everywhere, all over the parking lot, just 10 limited spots. And I think it makes sense, and I would simply ask the board to approve it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I do have one question. Do we know which section of the property is in the residential zone versus the commercial zone?
I've looked at that before. I think it's somewhere towards the front of the property.
Front of the property is the
Would be Granite Avenue.
meaning that's the business portion?
Yes.
Yeah, there used to be a auto dealership.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not a large portion at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, we'll close the evidentiary portion of the hearing and deliberate right here and now. Would you like to speak first this time, Rod?
It sounds like, that our role is just to determine if this variance goes, and then there will be a lot of other conditions that will be put onto the structure. Is that my understanding?
That's my understanding as well, although perhaps we could give some guidance to them.
Yeah, I think so.
And
has there been any, I'm just curious, any kind of, and maybe this isn't appropriate, but as far as a lot of people with doing now, encouraging their employees to take ride shares or paying for employees to take different transportation to work, finding that the freed up spots add so much more in revenue.
I can't imagine that that's going to be useful for the food center. I mean, I live in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, the traffic there is unbelievable. When there's a storm, the whole place is packed. You know, you
No,
can't-
but just for the
it just-
employees.
No, but there's no else, there's no other places for them to park. And this has been a history in the variances. They've always had issues about parking, having to negotiate something with Fitness Unlimited about them using the parking spaces. So I just don't think, and there's more pressure all the time in East Milton Square because of the restaurants now that are
Right.
there. There's a proposal for a big rental project that's just going to make the whole parking situation worse. So, I mean, it's, we've sat on a couple of hearings together for other projects that have been proposed for East Milton, and the parking is a huge problem. And asking the town to do something is something everybody thinks of, but nobody in town is willing to take somebody's property by eminent domain to put in a parking lot. So, and that's kind of really the only option. But, yeah, I mean, I think you could probably talk about ride sharing and stuff, but people are coming from all over the place.
It just seems a
Yeah.
lot less expensive than a large
Yeah.
hydraulic system.
Well, I'm sure they priced it out.
well,
I think that our role is, the suggested, my suggestions as far as if we were to put conditions, or if somebody else after us were to put conditions, is just maybe assigned parking, so like they have some kind of a strategy as to the people who come into work earlier, and maybe the same consistencies of cars, so that the neighbors would have the assurances that, the big SUVs are not going to be parked on the top of the structure, and that the employees that are utilizing this structure are the ones that are working for 8-hour shifts and not for a 3-hour shift, or, things like that, so that it's not.
So for
it could be
full-time employees, not part-time.
Full-time employees, correct, and maybe some consistency to which, based on the car that they drive consistently to work, which parking spot would they be assigned to?
It's kind of going to depend upon who's there what day. I mean, I think that's really the planning board kind of role. I mean, I think we would put in guidelines that said that, we only want to do it from 8 to 8. We could say certainly requiring the shielding that they've talked about.
and the safety issues as well. I
Yeah.
think it's
The lighting.
I think
Yeah.
that's a reasonable request, yeah.
But I'd look to the planning board to
Right.
put in more detail, but we could definitely provide the guidelines for that.
So I'm seeing that would be the hours, 8 to 8, safety of restricting the keys, as you mentioned, shielding,
The motion light.
the motion light,
And
yes.
downward lighting, I think Mr.
Yep.
Dunn had indicated to us would make sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, I think those would, yes?
The noise, putting the motor in the structure and having it closer.
Right, that.
Oh, yeah.
That would be in a structure to begin
Yes.
with, yes,
Yeah.
okay. And there was talk also about locating that maybe not right next to the residences, but a little bit further away if that's
A little bit
possible.
closer to the store area.
Yeah, if that's possible, I think that would be something that we should put this condition on as well. And my understanding is you're fine with that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Are we ready to make a decision?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor of giving this application the go-ahead with the conditions that we just spoke about, say aye.
Aye.
All against? Congratulations.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll do this one?
Sure.
Just initial next to in favor?
Yeah.
Motor structure, near building, shielding, safety, downward lighting, and motion lighting.
Yeah. I have my notes too.
That's what I'm looking for.
And then maybe, do we
Just the
want to
two?
put in? No, here's the third one. Do we want to put in something about the full-time employees?
I just thought that was a good, I
It's a
mean.
good idea.
I mean, just
have
so
a big
that there's,
sense.
there's not changing all day long. Like
This-
have some flow, I don't know. It's more in their favor than
Yeah.
us, but. Tell them how to run their business. Let me just give you some extra
Yeah,
advice.
that's exactly what we're doing.
By the way.
All right, should they be through you and then you have to sign that decision?
I've got the decision.
So what happens when you have an all-women board? We're going to not only